I was in the front passenger seat. Keyshawn was driving, and Jermaine and Rayshawn were in the back. They ended up starting to fall asleep at that point.
As the four headed down the rain-soaked New Jersey Turnpike, a state trooper would pull alongside of them just south of exit 8.
I saw the troopers and the cop car right beside us, like for at least 3 or 4 minutes, looking inside the car.
I seen the cruiser on my left side. I intentionally did not look at him, and that's when he comes behind me and puts the sirens on. And I knew he wanted me to pull me over.
I didn't think much of it because I guess that's normal, or at least I grew up thinking that's normal. Cops looking in and then moving on.
I was in the middle lane. I couldn't pull over right away, so I probably had to drive before I attempted to try to pull over.
Keyshawn was going at the speed limit, so I didn't think he was going to get pulled over. And then we did get pulled over.
I pulled over to the shoulder. I was nervous. I'm looking for my wallet. I thought I put the car in park, but it was actually in reverse. So when I pulled my foot off the brake, obviously it rolled back and hit the cruiser. And the police officers, they break the passenger side window with his baton, and basically puts his 9mm in there.
Pretty much that's when all hell broke loose.
"13 shots fired. 4 lives changed forever."
Next thing I remember, man, was glass flying, Keyshawn screaming, Jermaine screaming.
I thought we was getting carjacked. I didn't think it was the cops until the arm of the state trooper reached into the car to open fire on Danny. He actually watched Danny surrender his hands to the air with no weapons, no resistance, and pause for a second and open fire. And that put in my mindset that we was gonna die.
Once I seen that barrel, I ducked. The car was in reverse. It rolled back into the highway. We actually got hit by another oncoming car, and Danny jumps in the driver's seat.
I start yelling, "Please don't shoot, the car's not in park." So I show my hands, and he points his gun at me, and next thing you know, he just starts shooting. So I just cover up like this, and I believe that's when I get shot a few times. I'm hearing all types of other stuff, shots in the back, some of the guys screaming in the back. When I finally, snapped out of it, and I looked up, and I realized that the van has been rolling the whole time. The car is literally rolling into the turnpike.
I tried to open the door and get out when the cops were actually still shooting at us when the car was rolling. When I tried to open the door on my side, that's when we got hit by another car, and then we just rolled into a ditch. And then from there, that's when I opened the door. But as soon as I opened the door to jump out, I happen to look up the hill, and I see all them cops. And then they come running down the hill talking about, "Freeze, put your hand up, get on the floor, put your face down on the floor."
The trooper came to my door, opened it up, and pulled me right out. So as I get pulled out, my sneaker comes off. That's when my ankle gets sprained. He decides to handcuff my right arm, which is the one that I'm feeling all the pain from. So he handcuffs it and pulls it from behind. At that moment, I thought I wasn't gonna live.
They came, snatched us out the car, threw the handcuffs. I'm like, I got shot, I don't care. So what? Yelling back and forth, digging us like they don't care. Keyshawn, like, my brother got shot, he's screaming, can you help him? He like, no, I'm not helping nobody, stay right here, y'all under arrest.
I'm lying, on my face on that bench, on the mud. It's like the longest wait of my life. I start to lose a lot of blood. I start to feel a lot weaker.
I was the only one that remained in the car because I was pinned. My legs was caught. It was caught in a chair. They tried to do everything. Tried to jackknife me out. Cop choked me out. But they realized they couldn't move me. So what they did, they handcuffed me from behind over the seat.
They finally get the handcuffs off of me, to roll me over and put me on the stretcher. Once I get on the stretcher and they start walking me up the hill, that's when I got to see Jermaine. And he was just like, both arms like this, like laid back. I'm like, shit. In my mind, I'm just thinking like, damn, that boy done died.
There's so many emotions that went through me that night. I thought about the past, I thought about the present, I thought about not having a future.
Despite the seriousness of the boys' injuries, some officers at the scene made it difficult for emergency workers to do their jobs.
So when they put me on the stretcher there, the ambulance lady says to the cop, take the handcuffs off. He said, okay. He took the handcuffs off. Then he cuffs this arm. So I say, yo, why you cuffing the arm that got shot? Why don't you cuff my left arm? Well, this the arm I want to cuff. I said, oh, you one of those people. So then after that, we riding, and as we riding, I'm watching him, he watching me, and we watching each other. And I'm just looking at him, but only if he knew what I was thinking.
As the others were transported to an area hospital, Keyshawn Moore, the only one of four not struck by the bullets, was taken to a nearby precinct for questioning.
They took me to get interrogated, and they just hit me with questions. Different questions, the same questions, posing them differently, trying to, they want to see me slip up. But, I didn't slip up. And he started to see, hey, I'm articulate, I'm talking to him, I'm not no street thug. They knew, they had made a mistake.
Keyshawn would soon be released. He received tickets for speeding and driving with a revoked license. He was not charged with any crimes against the two troopers.
The next morning we woke up and I was under arrest, handcuffed to the bed with a stupid ass cop sitting next to me. And then we turn on the news and it says, 4 gentlemen on the turnpike had a shootout with New Jersey State Police.
I waited like for 7-8 hours before I saw him. They took me inside the room to see if that was my brother, because he was all swollen, his head, his shoulders. It didn't look like him.
My daughter called me. She told me that he was in the hospital, but she don't explain me nothing about what happened.
He told me I didn't do it, and they just shot me for no reason. And right there and then I knew he was innocent.
The initial reports allege that the boys tried to run down the state troopers. Police Chief Carl Williams held a press conference and he stated that the van was clocked at 74 miles per hour by a mounted radar gun and that the van moved quickly towards the troopers when parked. He referred to the boys several times as suspects. Finally, he was quoted as saying that the 4 were not college students, they were unemployed.
When you hear something like that on the news, where 4 kids tried to run over the police officers, you would think that you would hear something pertaining to weapons or drugs. And they didn't mention anything about weapons and drugs. So I have a feeling right now that they're plotting to protect these police officers because they made a big mistake.
Ralph Menard knew the boys' troubles were just beginning, so he hired local attorney David Ironman.
While these kids didn't have records, they initially had to put out the story that they were almost run over, but that's what they do. And that's your fight when you take on the governmental agencies like that you're going to run into the power they have with the media, of course, the money behind them if they want, and the ability to make any story they want appear in their favor. After I went down to the hospital, I began trying to figure out how we were going to attack the conduct of the troopers, to begin to show that these troopers, as well as the whole New Jersey State Police, were predominantly used race as a means to make arrests and stop vehicles.
Racial profiling is a crime. Police harassment is a crime.
Reverend Al Sharpton's headquarters was right up the block from where we lived. And my mother and father pretty much went over to his National Action Network and, pleaded with him to see about the situation.
It was something about the urgency of how he spoke that made me stop. He started begging me to look into it. And I said that staff will take care of it, we'll get back to you. He says, you don't understand, my son, his friends in a hospital in Jersey, and they're going to try to make them look like drug dealers or something. I need you to do something right away. And I actually saw tears swell up in his eyes. And it moved me because he was a father, not even a mother, that was that upset. I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll hold a press conference, and I will call for an investigation. I can't say that they are victims yet, but I can say we need an impartial investigation. We are outraged that it would have to come to this point before anyone seriously looks into the allegations of profiling on the turnpike.
Governor Christine Todd Whitman originally defended the actions of the troopers and denied the existence of racial profiling by the New Jersey State Police.
I prepared approximately a 25-page document requesting everything under the sun, from the troopers' clothes to the radar device that supposedly was used. It was at this point that Mr. Giroux closed the door in the barracks and looked at me and said, I'm going to investigate this and let the chips fall where they may. He disclosed to me that there was no radar in the trooper's vehicle, even though the New Jersey State Police had released to the press that they had been clocked on radar. And we began talking about making arrangements to examine the van that the kids were in.
As Iron Man continued his aggressive pursuit of the truth, the boys remained hospitalized, recovering from their injuries.
I got shot 6 times altogether. I got shot here. Both of my bones were shattered. They had to put a metal plate here to join my bone together. Here, they had to put another metal plate from right there. I got shot there, and this one, it's in my stomach over here. But it's like in an area that's too dangerous to go get it. You see that one? That one, I guess I was like an inch away from being paralyzed.
My knee, my left leg. Still little fragments of my knee. You can tell. My right arm.
If you were to look at the actual statistics, you would see that basically 90 to 100% of the time, the group of troopers who worked out of that barracks, in particular, these troopers pulled over nobody but Hispanics and blacks. As we further went on, actually, there was internal findings by the New Jersey State Police of the same thing, that basically 100% of some of the barracks only searched vehicles of minorities.
One of the things we suggested is, why don't you talk to the other people who these two officers interacted with that very day? And when they looked at the log sheet, and the log sheets they were required to fill out, and they were supposed to fill out when they stopped anybody, the race of those people, the make and model of the car, and the license plate and address. And the last interaction, last stop they had before they went to these 4 young men were these 2 guys from Trenton, New Jersey. And they had their address, and they listed them as 2 white men living in Trenton, New Jersey. And they knocked on the door of the house, and an African-American male, a very dark complexion, answered the door, and they said, we're looking for Mr. Smith, and Mr. Brown. And they go, I'm Mr. Smith, and he's Mr. Brown. And they're 2 dark complexioned black men. And the investigators, holy cow, they were lying about this.
Over 3 weeks had passed since the night of the shooting, and scathing evidence of racial profiling continued to surface at an alarming rate.
Once upon a time up in Jersey, yo.
Sing it, daddy.
Hey.
Katherine, Massey, Book Club, Context of White Supremacy, Gus T. Renegade, the worthless Negro from Virginia, in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the global system of white supremacy. Today's date, Friday, June 5, 2026. So I have been told, our 8th study session on Lion Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness. We are picking up the section. We are kind of midway through I don't know if it's a chapter or a subsection No Place Like Home. That's what we'll be picking up at, where she's talking about President Clinton and HUD, H-U-D. The audio segment that we heard at the beginning, that was from, and I had lots of different things that I was thinking about playing to preface today, but last week she talked about the New Jersey Turnpike and all of the black people, non-white people that have been stopped and harassed on the Turnpike for years. I think we've had Victim of New Jersey chime in to talk about a little bit of this. That documentary is titled For Chosen, and there's no space. If you want to check it out, see it, I think it's on YouTube. It is on YouTube, but it's the number 4, Chosen, no space. So For Chosen, that's the name of it, and it talks about what happened in April 23rd, 1998. Danny Reyes, Keyshawn Moore, Rayshawn Brown, and Jermaine Grant were the 4 non-white males. Interestingly, it reminded me of the Central Park 5 situation from the 1980s, where they accused all these non-white males of raping a white woman, and then they got all just lumped as black males, but some of them were not black, non-white. This is the same thing. I think at least one of these males is classified, like you get to see their parents and relatives in the documentary. Non-white, non-black would be one of these males, but if you just, if they put the pictures up so you get to see, oh, this is Danny, this is Keyshawn, this is Rayshawn, this is Jermaine, or if you didn't see them in the context of this film, if you just saw them like standing outside next to your car at 9 o'clock at night, I think most of us, it would be, them niggers about to break in get the phone, call it. I don't think it would be I don't think anybody would be saying, oh, get ICE. Call the ICE people, because, yeah, he looked like he ain't got the right paperwork. I don't think anybody would say that. I think it would be, it's for niggers, and they might be up to no good, which is what the state trooper said on the Turnpike. They had the same conclusion. Anyway, you heard Al Sharpton, who got involved in this case. You heard, or you didn't hear, but the late, great Johnny L. Cochran Jr. got involved in this case. The officers were indicted, charged, even they got convictions in this case, but no prison time for the officers who terrorized these young non-white males. We heard lots of evidence about these officers. They only stopped black people. They only stopped non-white people on the Turnpike. Of course, that would seem to undermine the notion of colorblind, and particularly that anecdote at the end. They said, well, why don't you go talk to some of the other black people why don't you go talk to some of the other people that they stopped on the Turnpike that night? They were white. We don't just stop only non-white people. So they go and track down these 2 males and find out, oh, wait a minute, they done lied about lies and lies and lies. A lot of lies in this book too, but that is the system of white supremacy racism. Predominant weapon, primarily operated through deception, whether it's enforcement officials or literature that purports to explain racism. The deception is legion. We will get to it. Katherine, Massey Book Club, audio segment 1. Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow. Lies and misinformation all the way.
Look up in the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane.
Working out Johnny Blaze, ain't a damn thing changed. So high that I can kiss the sky.
In response to the new legislation and prodding by President Clinton, the Housing and Urban Development Department, HUD, developed guidelines to press public housing agencies to evict drug dealers and other criminals and screen tenants for criminal records. HUD's one-strike guide calls on housing agencies to take full advantage of their authority to use stringent screening and eviction procedures. It also encourages housing authorities not only to screen all applicants' criminal records, but to develop their own exclusion criteria. The guide notes that agency ratings and funding are tied to whether they are adopting and implementing effective applicant screening, a clear signal that agencies may be penalized for not cleaning house. Throughout the United States, public housing agencies have adopted exclusionary policies that deny eligibility to applicants even with the most minor criminal backgrounds. The crackdown inspired by the war on drugs has resulted in unprecedented punitiveness, as housing officials began exercising their discretion to deny poor people access to public housing for virtually any crime. Just about any offense will do, even if it bears scant relation to the likelihood the applicant will be a good tenant. The consequences for real families can be devastating. Without housing, people can lose their children. Take, for example, the 42-year-old African-American man who applied for public housing for himself and his 3 children who were living with him at the time. He was denied because of an earlier drug possession charge for which he had pleaded guilty and served 30 days in jail. Of course, the odds that he would have been convicted of drug possession would have been extremely low if he were white. But as an African American, he was not only targeted by the drug war, but then denied access to housing because of his conviction. Since being denied housing, he has lost custody of his children and is homeless. Many nights he sleeps outside on the streets. Stiff punishment indeed for a minor drug offense, especially for his children, who are innocent of any crime. Remarkably, under current law, an actual conviction or finding of a formal violation is not necessary to trigger exclusion. Public housing officials are free to reject applicants simply on the basis of arrests, regardless of whether they result in convictions or fines. Because African Americans and Latinos are targeted by police in the war on drugs, it is far more likely that they will be arrested for minor nonviolent crimes. Accordingly, HUD policies excluding people from housing assistance based on arrests as well as convictions guarantee highly discriminatory results. Perhaps no aspect of the HUD regulatory regime has been as controversial, however, as the no-fault clause contained in every public housing lease. Public housing tenants are required to do far more than simply pay their rent on time, keep the noise down, and make sure their homes are kept in good condition. The one strike and you're out policy requires every public housing lease to stipulate that if the tenant or any member of the tenant's household or any guest of the tenant engages in any drug-related or other criminal activity on or off the premises, the tenancy will be terminated. Prior to the adoption of this policy, it was generally understood that a tenant could not be evicted unless he or she had some knowledge of or participation in alleged criminal activity. Accordingly, in Rucker v. Davis, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals struck down the no-fault clause on the grounds that the eviction of innocent tenants who were not accused or even aware of the alleged criminal activity was inconsistent with the legislative scheme. The U.S. Supreme Court reversed. The court ruled in 2002 that under federal law, public housing tenants can be evicted regardless of whether they had knowledge of or participated in alleged criminal activity. According to the court, William Lee and Barbara Hill were rightfully evicted after their grandsons were charged with smoking marijuana in a parking lot near their apartments. Herman Walker was properly evicted as well, after police found cocaine on his caregiver. And Pearlie Rucker was rightly evicted following the arrest of her daughter for possession of cocaine a few blocks from home. The court ruled these tenants could be held civilly liable for the nonviolent behavior of their children and caregivers. They could be tossed out of public housing due to no fault of their own. In the abstract, policies barring or evicting people who are somehow associated with criminal activity may seem like a reasonable approach to dealing with crime in public housing, particularly when crime has gotten out of control. Desperate times call for desperate measures, it is often said. The problem, however, is twofold. These vulnerable families have nowhere to go, and the impact is inevitably discriminatory. People who are not poor and who are not dependent upon public assistance for housing need not fear that, if their son, daughter, caregiver, or relative is caught with some marijuana at school or shoplifts from a drugstore, they will find themselves suddenly evicted, homeless. But for countless poor people, particularly racial minorities who disproportionately rely on public assistance, that possibility looms large. As a result, many families are reluctant to allow their relatives, particularly those who are recently released from prison, to stay with them, even temporarily. No one knows exactly how many people are excluded from public housing because of criminal records, or even the number of people with criminal records who would be ineligible if they applied. There is no national data available. We do know, however, that roughly 65 million people have criminal records, including tens of millions of Americans who have been arrested but never convicted of any offense, or convicted only of minor misdemeanors, and they, too, are routinely excluded from public housing. What happens to these people denied housing assistance or evicted from their homes? Where do they go? Thousands of them become homeless. A study conducted by the McCormick Institute of Public Affairs found that nearly a quarter of guests in homeless shelters had been incarcerated within the previous year. People who were unable to find somewhere to live after release from prison walls. Prisoners returning home are typically the poorest of the poor, lacking the ability to pay for private housing and routinely denied public housing assistance, the type of assistance which could provide some much-needed stability in their lives. For them, going home is more a figure of speech than a realistic option. More than 650,000 people are released from prison each year, and for many, finding a new home appears next to impossible, not just in the short term, but for the rest of their lives. As a 41-year-old African-American mother remarked after being denied housing because of a single arrest 4 years prior to her application, "I'm trying to do the right thing. I deserve a chance. Even if I was the worst criminal, I deserve a chance. Everybody deserves a chance." Boxed in. Aside from figuring out where to sleep, nothing is more worrisome for people leaving prison than figuring out where to work. In fact, a study by the Vera Institute found that during the first month after release from prison, people consistently were more preoccupied with finding work than anything else. Some of the pressure to find work comes directly from the criminal justice system. According to one survey of state parole agencies, 40 of the 51 jurisdictions surveyed, the 50 states and the District of Columbia, required parolees to maintain gainful employment. Failure to do so could mean more prison time. Even beyond the need to comply with the conditions of parole, employment satisfies a more basic human need, the fundamental need to be self-sufficient, to contribute, to support one's family, and to add value to society at large. Finding a job allows a person to establish a positive role in the community, develop a healthy self-image, and keep a distance from negative influences and opportunities for illegal behavior. Work is deemed so fundamental to human existence in many countries around the world that it is regarded as a basic human right. Deprivation of work, particularly among men, is strongly associated with depression and violence. Landing a job after release from prison is no small feat. "I've watched the discrimination and experienced it firsthand when you have to check the box," says Susan Burton, a formerly incarcerated woman who has dedicated her life to providing women released from prison the support necessary to reestablish themselves in the workforce. The box she refers to is the question on job applications in which applicants are asked to check yes or no if they have ever been convicted of a crime. "It's not only on job applications," Burton explains. "It's on housing, it's on a school application, it's on welfare applications, it's everywhere you turn." Nearly every state allows private employers to discriminate on the basis of past criminal convictions. In fact, employers in most states can deny jobs to people who were arrested but never convicted of any crime. Only 10 states prohibit all employers and licensing agencies from considering arrests, and 3 states prohibit some employers and occupational and licensing agencies from doing so. Employers in a growing number of professions are barred by state licensing agencies from hiring people with a wide range of criminal convictions, even convictions unrelated to the job or license sought. The result of these discriminatory laws is that virtually every job application, whether for dog catcher, bus driver, Burger King cashier, or accountant, asks ex-offenders to check the box. Most ex-offenders have difficulty even getting an interview after they have checked the box, because most employers are unwilling to consider hiring a self-identified criminal. One survey showed that although 90% of employers say they are willing to consider filling their most recent job vacancy with a welfare recipient, only 40% are willing to consider doing so with an ex-offender. Similarly, a 2002 survey of 122 California employers revealed that although most employers would consider hiring someone convicted of a misdemeanor offense, the numbers dropped dramatically for those convicted of felonies. Less than a quarter of employers were willing to consider hiring someone convicted of a drug-related felony. The number plummeted to 7% for a property-related felony, and less than 1% for a violent felony. Even those who hope to be self-employed, for example, as a barber, manicurist, gardener, or counselor, may discover that they are denied professional licenses on the grounds of past arrests or convictions, even if their offenses have nothing at all to do with their ability to perform well in their chosen profession. For most people coming out of prison, a criminal conviction adds to their already problematic profile. About 70% of offenders and ex-offenders are high school dropouts, and according to at least one study, about half are functionally illiterate. Many offenders are tracked for prison at early ages, labeled as criminals in their teen years, and then shuttled from their decrepit, underfunded inner-city schools to brand-new, high-tech prisons. The communities and schools from which they came failed to prepare them for the workforce, and once they have been labeled criminals, their job prospects are forever bleak. Adding to their troubles is the spatial mismatch between their residence and employment opportunities. Willingness to hire ex-offenders is greatest in construction or manufacturing, industries that require little customer contact, and weakest in retail trade and other service sector businesses. Manufacturing jobs, however, have all but disappeared from the urban core during the past 30 years. Not long ago, young, unskilled men could find decent, well-paying jobs at large factories in most major northern cities. Today, due to globalization and deindustrialization, that is no longer the case. Jobs can be found in the suburbs, mostly service sector jobs, but employment for unskilled men with criminal convictions, while difficult to find anywhere, is especially hard to find close to home. An ex-offender whose driver's license has been suspended or who does not have access to a car often faces nearly insurmountable barriers to finding employment. Driving to the suburbs to pick up and drop off applications, attend interviews, and pursue employment leads may be perfectly feasible if you have a driver's license and access to a vehicle, but attempting to do so by bus is another matter entirely. An unemployed black male from Chicago's South Side explains, "Most of the time, the places be too far, and you need transportation, and I don't have none right now. If I had some, I'd probably be able to get a job. If I had a car and went way into the suburbs, 'cause there ain't none in the city." Those who actually land jobs in the suburbs find it difficult to keep them without reliable, affordable transportation. Murray McNair, a 22-year-old African-American, returned to Newark, New Jersey after being locked up for drug offenses. He shares a small apartment with his pregnant girlfriend, his sister, and her 2 children. Through a federally funded job training program operated by Goodwill Industries, McNair found a $9 an hour job at a warehouse 20 miles, 2 buses, and a taxi ride away. "I know it's going to be tough," he told a New York Times reporter, "but I can't be thinking about myself anymore." The odds of McNair, or any ex-offender in a similar situation, succeeding under these circumstances are small. If you make $9 per hour, but spend $20 or more getting to and from work every day, how do you manage to pay rent, buy food, and help to support yourself and a growing family? An unemployed 36-year-old black man quit his suburban job because of the transportation problem. "I was spending more money getting to work than I earned working." The Black Box. Black ex-offenders are the most severely disadvantaged applicants in the modern job market. While all job applicants, regardless of race, are harmed by a criminal record, the harm is not equally felt. Not only are African Americans far more likely to be labeled criminals, they are also more strongly affected by the stigma of a criminal record. Black men convicted of felonies are the least likely to receive job offers of any demographic group, and suburban employers are the most unwilling to hire them. Sociologist Diva Pazier explains that those sent to prison are institutionally branded as a particular class of individuals, with major implications for their place and status in society. The negative credential associated with a criminal record represents a unique mechanism of state-sponsored stratification. As Pazier puts it, it is the state that certifies particular individuals in ways that qualify them for discrimination or social exclusion. The official status of this negative credential differentiates it from other sources of social stigma, offering legitimacy to its use as a basis for discrimination. 4 decades ago, employers were free to discriminate explicitly on the basis of race. Today, employers feel free to discriminate against those who bear the prison label, i.e., those labeled criminals by the state. The result is a system of stratification based on the official certification of individual character and competence, a form of branding by the government. Given the incredibly high level of discrimination suffered by black men in the job market and the structural barriers to employment in the new economy, it should come as no surprise that a huge percentage of African American men are unemployed. Nearly 1/3 of young black men in the United States today are out of work. The jobless rate for young black male dropouts, including those incarcerated, is a staggering 65%. In an effort to address the rampant joblessness among black men labeled criminals, a growing number of advocates in recent years have launched Ban the Box campaigns. These campaigns have been successful in cities like San Francisco, where All of Us or None, a nonprofit grassroots organization dedicated to eliminating discrimination against ex-offenders, persuaded the San Francisco Board of Supervisors to approve a resolution designed to eliminate hiring discrimination against people with criminal records. San Francisco's new policy, which took effect in June 2006, seeks to prevent discrimination on the basis of a criminal record by removing the criminal history box from the initial application. An individual's past convictions will still be considered, but not until later in the hiring process, when the applicant has been identified as a serious candidate for the position. The only exception is for those jobs for which state or local laws expressly bar people with certain specific convictions from employment. These applicants will still be required to submit conviction history information at the beginning of the hiring process. However, unlike a similar ordinance adopted in Boston, San Francisco's policy applies only to public employment, not to private vendors that do business with the city or county of San Francisco. While these grassroots initiatives and policy proposals are major achievements, they raise questions about how best to address the complex and interlocking forms of discrimination experienced by black ex-offenders. Some scholars believe, based on the available data, that black males may suffer more discrimination, not less, when specific criminal history information is not available. Because the association of race and criminality is so pervasive, employers may use less accurate and discriminatory methods to screen out those perceived to be likely criminals. Popular but misguided proxies for criminality, such as race, receipt of public assistance, low educational attainment, and gaps in work history, could be used by employers when no box is available on the application form to identify criminals. This concern is supported by ethnographic work suggesting that employers have fears of violence by black men relative to other groups of applicants and act on those fears when making hiring decisions. Without disconfirming information in the job application itself, employers may consciously or unconsciously treat all black men as though they have a criminal record, effectively putting all or most of them in the same position as black ex-offenders. This research suggests that banning the box is not enough. We must also get rid of the mindset that puts black men in the box. Debtor's prison. The lucky few who land a decent job, one that pays a living wage and is in reasonable proximity to their residence, often discover that the system is structured in such a way that they still cannot survive in the mainstream legal economy. Upon release from prison, people are typically saddled with large debts, financial shackles that hobble them as they struggle to build a new life. In this system of control, like the one that prevailed during Jim Crow, one's debt to society often reflects the cost of imprisonment. Throughout the United States, newly released prisoners are required to make payments to a host of agencies, including probation departments, courts, and child support enforcement offices. In some jurisdictions, ex-offenders are billed for drug testing and even for the drug treatment they are supposed to receive as a condition of parole. These fees, costs, and fines are generally quite new, created by law within the past 20 years, and are associated with a wide range of offenses. Every state has its own rules and regulations governing their imposition. Florida, for example, has added more than 20 new categories of financial obligations for criminal defendants since 1996, while eliminating most exemptions for those who cannot pay. Examples of pre-conviction service fees imposed throughout the United States today include jail bookend fees levied at the time of arrest, jail per diems assessed to cover the cost of pretrial detention, public defender application fees charged when someone applies for court-appointed counsel, and the bail investigation fee imposed when the court determines the likelihood of the accused appearing at trial. Post-conviction fees include pre-sentence report fees, public defender recoupment fees, and fees levied on convicted persons placed in a residential or work release program. Upon release, even more fees may attach, including parole or probation service fees. Such fees are typically charged on a monthly basis during the period of supervision. In Ohio, for example, a court can order probationers to pay a $50 monthly supervision fee as a condition of probation. Failure to pay may warrant additional community control sanctions or a modification in the offender's sentence. 2/3 of people detained in jails report annual incomes under $12,000 prior to arrest. Predictably, most ex-offenders find themselves unable to pay the many fees, costs, and fines associated with their imprisonment, as well as their child support debts, which continue to accumulate while a person is incarcerated. As a result, many ex-offenders have their paychecks garnished. Federal law provides that a child support enforcement officer can garnish up to 65% of an individual's wages for child support. On top of that, probation officers in most states can require that an individual dedicate 35% of his or her income toward the payment of fines, fees, surcharges, and restitution charged by numerous agencies. Accordingly, a former inmate living at or below the poverty level can be charged by 4 or 5 departments at once and can be required to surrender 100% of his or her earnings. As a New York Times editorial soberly observed, people caught in this impossible predicament are less likely to seek regular employment, making them even more susceptible to criminal relapse. Whether or not ex-offenders make the rational choice to participate in the illegal economy, rather than have up to 100% of their wages garnished, they may still go back to prison for failure to meet the financial portion of their probation supervision requirements. Although debtor's prison is illegal in all states, many states use the threat of probation or parole revocation as a debt collection tool. In fact, in some jurisdictions, individuals may choose to go to jail as a way to reduce their debt burdens, a practice that has been challenged as unconstitutional. Adding to the insanity, many states suspend driving privileges for missed debt payments, a practice that often causes people to lose employment, if they had it, and creates yet another opportunity for jail time, driving with the suspended license. In this regime, many people are thrown back in prison simply because they have been unable, with no place to live and no decent job, to pay back thousands of dollars of prison-related fees, fines, and child support. Some offenders, like Aura Lee Hurley, find themselves trapped by fees and fines in prison. Hurley was a prisoner held at the Gateway Diversion Center in Atlanta in 2006. She was imprisoned because she owed a $705 fine. As part of the diversion program, Hurley was permitted to work during the day and return to the center at night. 5 days a week she worked full-time at a restaurant, earning $6.50 an hour, and after taxes, net about $700 a month. Room and board at the diversion center was about $600, and her monthly transportation costs $52. Miscellaneous other expenses, including clothes, shoes, and personal items such as toothpaste, quickly exhausted what was left. Hurley's attorney decried the trap she was in. This is a situation where if this woman was able to write a check for the amount of the fine, she would be out of there. And because she can't, she's still in custody. It's as simple as that. Although she worked a full-time job while in custody, most of her income went to repay the diversion program, not the underlying fine that put her in custody in the first place. This harsh reality harks back to the days after the Civil War, when former slaves and their descendants were arrested for minor violations, slapped with heavy fines, and then imprisoned until they could pay their debts. The only means to pay off their debts was through labor on plantations and farms, known as convict leasing, or in prisons that had been converted to work farms. Paid next to nothing, convicts were effectively enslaved in perpetuity, as they were unable to earn enough to pay off their debts. Today, many inmates work in prison, typically earning far less than the minimum wage, often less than $3 per hour, sometimes as little as 25 cents. Their accounts are then charged for various expenses related to their incarceration, making it impossible for them to save the money that otherwise would allow them to pay off their debts or help them make a successful transition when released from prison. Prisoners are typically released with only the clothes on their backs and a pittance in gate money. Sometimes the money is barely enough to cover the cost of a bus ticket back home. Let them eat cake. So here you are, a newly released prisoner, homeless, unemployed, and carrying a mountain of debt. How do you feed yourself, care for your children? There is no clear answer to that, but one thing is for sure. Don't count on the government for any help. Not only will you be denied housing, but you may well be denied food. Welfare reform legislation signed by President Bill Clinton in 1996 ended individual entitlements to welfare and provided states with block grants. The Temporary Assistance for Needy Family Program imposes a 5-year lifetime limit on benefits and requires welfare recipients, including those who have young children and lack child care, to work in order to receive benefits. In the abstract, a 5-year limit may sound reasonable, but consider this. When one is labeled a criminal, forced to check the box on applications for employment and housing, and burdened by thousands of dollars in debt, is it possible that one will live on the brink of severe poverty for more than 5 years, and thus require food stamps for oneself and one's family? Until 1996, there was a basic understanding that poverty-stricken mothers raising children should be afforded some minimal level of assistance with food and shelter. The 5-year limit on benefits, however, is not the law's worst feature. The law also requires that states permanently bar individuals with drug-related felony convictions from receiving federally funded public assistance. The statute does not contain an opt-out provision, but as of 2010, only 13 states and the District of Columbia had opted out entirely. Most states have partially opted out, affording exceptions for people in drug treatment, for example. It remains the case, however, that thousands of people with felony drug convictions in the United States are deemed ineligible for food stamps for the rest of their lives, including pregnant women, people in drug treatment or recovery, and people suffering from HIV/AIDS, simply because they were once caught with drugs. The silent minority. If shackling former prisoners with a lifetime of debt and authorizing discrimination against them in employment, housing, education, and public benefits is not enough to send the message that they are not wanted and not even considered full citizens, then stripping voting rights from those labeled criminals surely gets the point across. 48 states and the District of Columbia prohibit inmates from voting while incarcerated for a felony offense. Only 2 states, Maine and Vermont, permit inmates to vote. The vast majority of states continue to withhold the right to vote when prisoners are released on parole. Even after the term of punishment expires, some states deny the right to vote for a period ranging from a number of years to the rest of one's life. This is far from the norm in other countries, like Germany, for instance, which allows and even encourages prisoners to vote. In fact, about half of European countries allow all incarcerated people to vote, while others disqualify only a small number of prisoners from the polls. Prisoners vote either in their correctional facilities or by some version of absentee ballot in their town of previous residence. Almost all of the countries that place some restrictions on voting in prison are in Eastern Europe, part of the former communist bloc. No other country in the world disenfranchises people who are released from prison in a manner even remotely resembling the United States. In fact, the United Nations Human Rights Committee has charged that U.S. disenfranchisement policies are discriminatory and violate international law. In those few European countries that permit limited post-prison disqualification, the sanction is very narrowly tailored, and the number of people disenfranchised is probably in the dozens or hundreds. In the United States, by contrast, voting disqualification upon release from prison is automatic, with no legitimate purpose, and affects millions. Even those former prisoners who are technically eligible to vote frequently remain disenfranchised for life. Every state has developed its own process for restoring voting rights to ex-offenders. Typically, the restoration process is a bureaucratic maze that requires the payment of fines or court costs. The process is so cumbersome, confusing, and onerous that many ex-offenders who are theoretically eligible to vote never manage to get their voting rights back. Throughout much of the United States, ex-offenders are expected to pay fines and court costs and submit paperwork to multiple agencies in an effort to win back a right that should never have been taken away in a democracy. These bureaucratic minefields are the modern-day equivalent of poll taxes and literacy tests. Colorblind rules designed to make voting a practical impossibility for a group defined largely by race. The message communicated by felon disenfranchisement laws, policies, and bureaucratic procedures is not lost on those, such as Clinton Drake, who are effectively barred from voting for life. Drake, a 55-year-old African-American man in Montgomery, Alabama, was arrested in 1988 for possession of marijuana. 5 years later, he was arrested again, this time for having about $10 worth of the drug on him. Facing between 10 and 20 years in prison as a repeat offender, Drake, a Vietnam veteran, and at the time a cook on a local Air Force base, took his public defender's advice and accepted a plea bargain. Under the plea agreement, he would only have to spend 5 years behind bars. 5 years for 5 joints. Once released, Drake found he was forbidden by law from voting until he paid his $900 in court costs, an impossible task, given that he was unemployed and the low-wage jobs he might conceivably find would never allow him to accumulate hundreds of dollars in savings. For all practical purposes, he would never be able to vote again. Shortly before the 2004 presidential election, he said in despair, "I put my life on the line for this country. To me, not voting is not right. It led to a lot of frustration, a lot of anger. My son's in Iraq, in the army just like I was. My oldest son, he fought in the first Persian Gulf conflict. He was in the Marines. This is my baby son over there right now, but I'm not able to vote. They say I owe $900 in fines. To me, that's a poll tax. You've got to pay to vote. It's restitution, they say. I came off parole on October 13th, 1999, but I'm still not allowed to vote. Last time I voted was in '88. Bush versus Dukakis. Bush won. I voted for Dukakis. If it was up to me, I'd vote his son out this time, too. I know a lot of friends got the same cases like I got, not able to vote. A lot of guys doing the same things like I was doing. Just marijuana. They treat marijuana in Alabama like you committed treason or something. I was on the 1965 Voting Rights March from Selma. I was 15 years old. At 18, I was in Vietnam fighting for my country. And now, unemployed, and they won't allow me to vote." Drake's vote, along with the votes of millions of other people labeled felons, might have made a real difference in 2004. There is no doubt their votes would have changed things in 2000. Following the election, it was widely reported that had the 600,000 former felons who had completed their sentence in Florida been allowed to vote, Al Gore would have been elected President of the United States rather than George W. Bush. 4 years later, voter registration workers in the South encountered scores of ex-offenders who were reluctant to register to vote, even if they were technically eligible, because they were scared to have any contact with governmental authorities. Many on welfare were worried that any little thing they did to bring attention to themselves might put their food stamps at risk. Others had been told by parole and probation officers that they could not vote, and although it wasn't true, they believed it, and the news spread like wildfire. "How long you think it take if someone tells you can't vote before it spreads?" asked one ex-offender. "It's been years and years people telling you can't vote. You live in a slum. You're not counted." Even those who knew they were eligible to register worried that registering to vote would somehow attract attention to them, perhaps land them back in jail. While this might strike some as paranoia, many Southern blacks have vivid memories of the harsh consequences that befell their parents and grandparents who attempted to vote in defiance of poll taxes, literacy tests, and other devices adopted to suppress the black vote. Many were terrorized by the Klan. Today, ex-offenders live in constant fear of a different form of racial repression, racial profiling, police brutality, and revocation of parole. One investigative journalist described the situation this way. Overwhelmingly, black people in Mississippi are scared of any form of contact with authorities they saw as looking for excuses to reincarcerate them. In neighborhood after neighborhood, the grandchildren of the civil rights pioneers from the 1950s were as scared to vote because of prisons and the threat of prisons as their grandparents were half a century ago because of the threat of the lynch mob. Nashambi Lambert of the Jackson ACLU concurs. People aren't even trying to get their vote back, she said. It's hard just getting them to attempt to register. They're terrorized. They're so scared of going back to jail that they won't even try it. Research indicates that a large number of close elections would have come out differently if felons had been allowed to vote, including at least 7 senatorial races between 1980 and 2000. The impact on those major elections undoubtedly would be greater if all those deterred or prevented from voting were taken into account. But as ex-offenders will hasten to emphasize, it's not just the big elections that matter. One ex-offender put it this way: I have no right to vote on the school referendums that will affect my children. I have no right to vote on how my taxes is going to be spent or used, which I have to pay whether I'm a felon or not, you know? So basically, I've lost all voice or control over my government. I get mad because I can't say anything because I don't have a voice. Those who do have their voting rights restored often describe a feeling of validation, even pride. I got a voice now, said Willa Womack, a 44-year-old African-American woman who had been incarcerated on drug charges. I can decide now who will be my governor, who will be my president. I have a vote now. I feel like somebody. It's a feeling of relief from where I came from, that I'm actually somebody. The pariahs. For Americans who are not caught up in this system of control, it can be difficult to imagine what life would be like if discrimination against you were perfectly legal, if you were not allowed to participate in the political system, and if you were not even eligible for food stamps or welfare and could be denied housing assistance. Yet as bad as these forms of discrimination are, many ex-offenders will tell you that the formal mechanisms of exclusion are not the worst of it. The shame and stigma that follows you for the rest of your life, that is the worst. It's not just the job denial, but the look that flashes across the face of a potential employer when he notices that the box has been checked, the way he suddenly refuses to look you in the eye. It is not merely the denial of the housing application, but the shame of being a grown man who has to beg his grandmother for a place to sleep at night. It is not simply the denial of the right to vote, but the shame one feels when a coworker innocently asks, "Who you going to vote for on Tuesday?" One need not be formally convicted in a court of law to be subject to this shame and stigma. As long as you look like or seem like a criminal, you are treated with the same suspicion and contempt, not just by police, security guards, or hall monitors at your school, but also by the woman who crosses the street to avoid you, and by the store employees who follow you through the aisles, eager to catch you in the act of being the criminal black man, the archetypal figure who justifies the new Jim Crow. Practically from cradle to grave, black males in urban ghettos are treated like current or future criminals. One may learn to cope with the stigma of criminality, but like the stigma of race, the prison label is not something that a black man in the ghetto can ever fully escape. For those newly released from prison, the pain is particularly acute. As Dorsey Nunn, an ex-offender and co-founder of All of Us or None, once put it, the biggest hurdle you got to get over when you walk out those prison gates is shame. That shame, that stigma, that label, that thing you wear around your neck saying, I'm a criminal. It's like a yoke around your neck, and it'll drag you down, even kill you if you let it. Many ex-offenders experience an existential angst associated with their permanent social exclusion. Henry, a young African-American convicted of a felony, explains, "It's like you broke the law, you bad. You broke the law, bang, you're not part of us anymore." That sentiment is shared by a woman currently incarcerated who described the experience this way. "When I leave here, it will be very difficult for me in the sense that I'm a felon, that I will always be a felon. For me to leave here, it will affect my job. It'll affect my education, custody of my children. It can affect child support. It can affect everywhere. Family, friends, housing. People that are convicted of drug crimes can't even get housing anymore. Yes, I did my prison time. How long are you going to punish me as a result of it? And not only on paper. I'm only on paper for 10 months when I leave here. That's all the parole I have. But that parole isn't going to be anything. It's the housing. It's the credit reestablishing. I mean, even to go to school, to work with my child's class. And I'm not a sex offender. But all I need is one parent who says, isn't she a felon? I don't want her with my child. The permanence of one's social exile is often the hardest to swallow. For many it seems inconceivable that for a minor offense you can be subjected to discrimination, scorn, and exclusion for the rest of your life. Human Rights Watch, in its report documenting the experiences of America's undercast, tells the story of a 57-year-old African-American woman denied rental housing by a federally funded landlord due to a minor conviction she didn't even know was on her record. After being refused reconsideration, she asked her caseworker in pained exasperation, "Am I going to be a criminal for the rest of my life?" When someone is convicted of a crime today, their debt to society is never paid. The cruel hand that Frederick Douglass spoke of more than 150 years ago has appeared once again. In this new system of control, like the last, many black men hold up their heads, if at all, against the withering influence of a nation's scorn and contempt. Willie Johnson, a 43-year-old African-American man recently released from prison in Ohio, explained it this way. "My felony conviction has been like a mental punishment because of all the obstacles. Every time I go to put in a job application, I've had 3 companies hire me and tell me to come to work the next day. But then the day before they'll call and tell me don't come in because you have a felony. And that's what's devastating, because you think you're about to go to work and they call you and say because of your felony we can't hire you. I've run into this at least a dozen times. 2 times I got very depressed and sad because I couldn't take care of myself as a man. It was like I wanted to give up, because in society nobody wants to give us a helping hand. Right now I'm considered homeless. I've never been homeless until I left the penitentiary, and now I know what it feels to be homeless. If it wasn't for my family, I would be in the streets sleeping in the cold. We black men have 3 strikes against us. 1, because we're black, and 2, because we're a black male, and the final strike is a felony. These are the greatest 3 strikes that a black man has against him in this country. I have friends who don't have a felony and have a hard time getting a job. But if a black man can't find a job to take care of himself, he is ashamed that he can't take care of his children."
Katherine, Massey Book Club, Context of White Supremacy. This book is so awful and in so many ways. We will get to the particulars. The number to dial is 720-716-7300. The code 564 943-POUND. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Number again, 720-716-7300. The code 564943-POUND. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. We left off in the, I guess, subsection The Pariahs. We're about halfway through this portion. I just want to get this in right quick. We'll get some of our emails. The email address, untiljustice@gmail.com. untiljustice@gmail.com. I specifically remember a number of people, when we started this book, said way back when this book was originally published and or when they originally read it, they appreciated the focus that Michelle Alexander placed on black males and how black males specifically are targeted in the impact of all of this greater confinement on us specifically. And I just made note of that. I hadn't read the book at the time, but said, okay, we'll see. All of the deception and lies and her having a white parent, all of that made me leery. Really? This is going to be like some ode to black males? Beyond black males, there is a layer of anti-blackness in this book that I really despise. And it came out most acutely in the portion where we just concluded. This passage where she's reading Willie Johnson, and I have to get the narrator's name for the audiobook, but I mean, read what is in the text. There are multiple points in this, excerpt that she reads from Mr. Johnson where the narrator makes contractions and forms broken English as opposed to just reading the text. For example, and it happened repeatedly, where the text says apparently what Willie Johnson wrote or what was transcribed was, but then the day before they will call and tell me don't come in. She narrated the day before they'll call and tell me don't come in. That's not what the text said. And this seems like it is all a direct quote. So apparently that's not what Mr. Johnson, he did not say they'll, THEY''. That's not what he said, and that's not what's in the book. This happens over and over again. Just a few sentences later, I'm considered homeless. I have never been homeless. That's what's written. The narrator told us, I'm considered homeless. I've never been homeless. That's not what's in the text. Now you might say that's not a big deal, and lots of people use contractions and shorthand. Great. That's not what is in the text. You are the narrator. You are not supposed to reinterpret, or I think this is how Willie would have said. Willie has it right here, what Willie Johnson said. It's not your job to remix it, and I think that's the way it's supposed to sound and all that. You can give emotion. You can give a different voice so that we know that it's a different speaker, but it should not be that you have actually changed the text of the book to make this person sound like they do not speak correct English. And I had noted that repeatedly throughout the section this week, not just with Willie Johnson here. There were many other times when black people were speaking, and they're the only people who do not speak correct English. When you got lame old Michelle Alexander, Stanford alum, her husband, Carter Stewart, Stanford alum, and you want to come out and speak all the King's English and quote all these white people, and then the few times that you hear black voices enter, you got Frederick Douglass in there too, slave who wasn't allowed to read, and even that's the reasoning why these black people would sound like that. But hey, I have read texts where there are white people who are illiterate, the white people in Appalachia or wherever else that they want to talk about, where they're illiterate, can't read, can't write correctly, make lots of grammatical errors, and they clean all of that up. You don't see that in the text. They take all those errors out so you can read it and grasp everything correctly. In fact, this is something that we've talked about before. Jeff Toobin's book, where he puts O.J. Simpson's letter in the run of his life, and it's got all these grammatical errors and misspellings and all that, like just stupid black people. That's the same impression that I got this week when she's quoting these black people who cannot speak English correctly and all that. And it's so jarring when you hear all of this correct English and then all of this broken, and it's always a black person. And then this, where the black person is speaking correct English, no apostrophes. Not that I have a problem with apostrophes, no problem there. But he didn't do that. He said, they will. But old Willie Johnson got that, they'll. You know, Willie ain't no grammar scholar. You know, Willie can't even spell grammar. Anyway, that amongst many other things bothered me greatly this week, but that's just where we ended at, and it kept. There were even others. I think I highlighted at least two, or I read two with you all, but I had others where it's written out. He said everything precisely, and she's, I need to make contradictions and shorten this and make it a little more slang and hip hop and urban. Man, get out of here. Which is what the red bone deception. That's what I've been saying for the whole time. And I got to be, now I am a little upset because I did miss a portion of text. I've been trying to edit out and make sure that I don't allow us to get in her edits and such. And I did miss a sentence or two, a few of them, where she snuck a few things in on us. I was a little bit upset about that. My apologies. I'll have to do better as we proceed. But I did do my job and get a massive chunk of text that was added. So I wasn't totally asleep at the wheel. The big chunk of text that was added that we did not hear. So this is in the section, The Black Box, about midway through the chapter. So the paragraph ends, we must also get rid of the mindset that puts black men in the box. This is no small change. Here we go. Edit. A recent study by the National Employment Law Project, NELP, suggests that many employers refuse to consider people with criminal records for a wide range of jobs, despite the fact that the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, has advised employers that flat bans may be illegal. In 1987, the EEOC issued guidelines advising employers that discrimination against people with criminal histories is permissible if and only if employers consider the nature and gravity of the offense or offenses, the time that has passed since the conviction and or completion of the sentence, and the nature of the job held or sought. According to the agency, an absolute bar to employment based on prior convictions without consideration of these factors violates the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act if such a bar has a racially disparate impact. EEOC guidelines do not have the force of law, but judges frequently turn to them when evaluating whether unlawful discrimination has occurred, and the EEOC has the power to sue employers that run afoul of Title VII. Apparently, few employers are deterred. NELP's study of Craigslist.com, which operates in more than 400 geographic areas, found that employers blatantly violate EEOC guidelines. Hundreds of ads precluded consideration of individuals with criminal conviction histories. For example, no arrests or convictions of any kind for the past 7 years. No felony arrests or convictions of any kind for life. Job ad for electrician contractor, September 29, Omni Energy Services Corps. We are looking for people with spotless, interesting word choice, background criminal history. Job ad for warehouse worker or delivery driver, September 2, 2010. All candidates will be E-verified and must clear a background check. no priors. Job ad for manufacturing job, October 5, 2010, Carlisle staffing firm operating in the Chicago area. In order to qualify as a driver for FedEx, you must have the following: clean criminal record, no misdemeanors, no felonies. Job ad for diesel mechanic delivery driver, September 24, 2010, contractor for FedEx Ground. Do not apply with any misdemeanors, felonies. Job ad for sewer selling technician, February 10, 2010, Luskin Clark Service Company. Minimum requirements for employment consideration, no exceptions, no misdemeanors, and no felonies of any type ever in background. Job ad for warehouse and manufacturing jobs, February 18, 2010, perimeter staffing. Although each of these statements violates the EEOC prohibition against blanket hiring bans, employers and their recruitment staffing agencies routinely limit the pool of qualified candidates to those with spotless, that word again, records, thus excluding millions of people from having the opportunity even to interview for jobs. Millions find themselves locked out of the legal economy, and no one with a record has a more difficult time getting hired than black men. That is a monstrous amount of text to add to the end of that chapter. She, in the debtor's prison section, I neglected to redact that chunk where she adds in Florida, for example, has added more than 20 new categories of financial obligations for defendants in criminal cases since 1996, while eliminating most exemptions for those who cannot pay. And then there are even big chunks on the next page as well, where she talks about those poverty penalties that was added in, and debtor's prison is illegal in all states. Many states use the threat of probation or parole revocation as a debt collection tool. That was added as well. I think that's all of the edits for the first portion. There will be more revisions for the second portion. I think I did get those, but I will double check to make sure. But man, and even that for me greatly ruins my enjoyment of the book. As I said, I just have not experienced this before, where a book is published in 2010 and by 2012 it's a totally different book. In my view, these are not basic edits. Sometimes the whole structuring of a chapter has changed, and sometimes it's pages of text that has been added. Statistics get changed. Easily one of the worst books I've ever read. And this sort of thing, again, lying. It's not a one-time thing. This is all the way. This is the entire structure of the book, can change on a whim, whatever is required to make sure that our predetermined conclusion is reached and supported. Accuracy be damned. Let's see. I'll do one email, and then we'll see if folks have thoughts, commentary to share. Let's see. Email number one. All the edits and such had moved my page around trying to get through all of Michelle Alexander's nonsense. Okle-dokles. Let's see. Email number one. The court ruled in 2002 that under the federal law, public housing tenants can be evicted regardless of whether they had knowledge of or participated in alleged criminal activity. According to the court, William Lee and Barbara Hill were rightfully evicted after their grandsons were charged with smoking ganja in a parking lot near their apartments. Herman Walker was properly evicted as well after police found cocaine on his caregiver. And Pearlie Rucker was rightly evicted following the arrest of her daughter for possession of cocaine a few blocks from home. The court ruled these tenants could be held civilly liable for the non-violent behavior of their children and caregivers. They could be tossed out of public housing due to no fault of their own. Why are Wayne and Katherine Harris and Sue and Tom Klebold, parents of Reb and Dill, walking free? Many ask that question. And hey, some of the more recent iterations of this behavior, hey, if this had happened now, if Columbine were to happen now, maybe they would be charged, as they should have been last millennium. 2, I've watched the discrimination and experienced it firsthand. When you have to check the box, says Susan Burton, an ex-offender who founded a business aimed at providing formerly incarcerated women the support necessary to re-establish themselves in the workforce. I immediately thought Susan Burton is white. The after reading about the racist policies enacted to prevent black people with criminal records from accessing employment, including entrepreneurship, housing, education, etc., that Michelle Alexander outlines later in this section, I'm convinced Susan Burton is white. I think we've talked about that, where she will mention these people and then not disclose, is this a white person? Is this a non-white person? Like, yeah, that particularly for the subject matter in this text. I bet we might be able to find some information on who this is, this white person, all that we might be able to find. We'll see. 3, one survey showed that although 90% of employers say they are willing to consider filing their most recent job vacancy with a welfare recipient, only 40% are willing to consider doing so with an ex-offender. This sentence suggests employers equate welfare recipients with ex-offenders. They are not the same. That is interesting. Or it might just be that they equate all of those groups with black people and say that's just will be our code for excluding the niggers. We'll say, oh no, we don't want welfare recipients, and we don't want ex-offenders, and we're not racist. See, we just we want trustworthy employees. See. We'll pause there because she got a little bit further ahead of us. We'll have to come back after we finish the second audio segment. Let's see the email again, untiljustice@gmail.com. The number 720-716-7300. The code 564-943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Let's see. Our caller 5962, if you had commentary to share, should be with us.
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so this text that we're reading that we just read for the first session, I noted that a lot of her, I guess, test people or people that she's speaking to or quoting are in the older range of like right around the 40 years old range of age. And so I wonder if that has to do with what you just mentioned, the broken text where she kind of feels like these people are older and that's how they would speak. So that's why she revises it. I don't know if that has anything to do with each other, but it's something I thought about because I noticed that all of their ages are in that range for some reason. The next thing I noticed was, again, the refusal to be able to just say who is practicing the discrimination, who is practicing the racism. In the passage where she's in the black box, it is the state that certifies particular individuals in ways that qualify them for discrimination or social exclusion. Who within the state does that? And then, again, we noted that all of these changes where she said that this is pretty much the same book, but then goes back to add. And so I finally decided to try to figure out if there was a reason why she did it. And I asked the chatbot. And the chatbot seems to think that there's two different significant things that take place while she's writing this book. She started writing the book apparently in 2006. And from 2005 to 2008, she was a member of the ACLU, particularly the director of the Racial Justice Project. And so apparently there was a kid that came in and was saying, hey, these Oakland police officers known as the Oakland Raiders are going around planting drugs and beating black residents and stuff like that. And as he tells her his story, he eventually gets around to telling her that he has a prior felony for drug convictions, in which she just dismisses him and escorts him out. And then eventually this scandal blows up in the mid-2000s, and then so supposedly she's writing this book, according to the chatbot, to kind of save face because she has guilt for the way she treated the young black male. And then the second thing that the chatbot brings up is that the 2008 election, with Obama being elected as president, they felt like, or it feels like she rushed into writing this because she has to hurry up and get this book out, or otherwise people aren't going to buy it, because now we're in a post-racial system with the election of Obama. And so now she's just put out non-scholarly work, and then she gets backlash from other scholars, and so that makes her change it multiple times. And that's all I have.
Wow, that is fascinating. Kind of both. I guess with the first one about this young black feller who comes in, and that is on a personal level, that is fascinating for Gus T, because I lived in Bay Area, California, and I specifically remember when I first moved to the Bay Area, California, that is one of the first things that I remember. And I remember a local white person telling me about the Oakland Riders and talking about that, riding around and jacking black people and all the rest. Like, what? I just remember him like, do what? Do what? Anyway, but I knew about that personally and living in that area, and said, oh my God, what is that going to happen to me? anyway, but so she's in California. Now, that doesn't surprise me at all in terms of her being, again, Michelle Alexander, with one white parent and growing up in racially restricted Oregon, Ashland to be specific. Man, and she had said in the preface, she said people saying that mass incarceration is like slavery and all the rest of it. She said, oh, you conspiracy theorists and CIA selling crack. Oh, you're a crank and a kook and a you got tinfoil hat. Get on out. She had said all that in the preface. So for this young black dude to say this, and for her to say, what? Mark Furman? For him to say that, oh, get on out of here, Leroy. You know that's a lie. Stop with the lies. Get on out of here. And then it comes out that, he was telling, and I'm working for the ACLU, and I told him to get on out of here, stop your lie. And for me, I believe that because it comes through in this scholarship. She does not strike me at all as someone who I really care about black people, and or I have an accurate and authentic understanding of racism, white supremacy, and how it impacts black people. Nothing about this book strikes me as that. Nothing. I don't know if what he told us is true about that incident, that if that is a part of what motivated her to do this book, her feeling bad in some way, shape, form because she failed this young black person and didn't listen to them. But, oh, man, I believe it. And to me, that is very much related to what I just said. When you hear black people quoted in this book and they sound all, yeah, you know what it is, and Leroy, that's what I'd be saying, and they ain't got my, like, oh my God, the red bone deception, and even, that's why Carter Stewart told us, our little octoroon cheering, maybe a white grandma, we all went to go see Race, and we asked our little octoroon cheering, they said, what y'all think about the biopic on the great Jesse? I was like, black, it's all about black this and black that. It took me a moment to pause because it was such a volcanic eruption of anti-blackness. Are you all talking about the movie? I haven't seen Race. I'm a little ignorant, a little behind on my TV viewing. I don't know that you could tell a biopic about Jesse Owens, unless it's a different Jesse. If it's the Jesse Owens that I'm familiar with, Adolf Hitler has got to be in this film, right? It wasn't, that Adolf, racist, I didn't want to see this. No. It was, black this and black that, and black, sounding like Adolf. That's what Adolf said, isn't it? Anyway, everything that we've heard so far, I totally believe that that's what's happened. maybe we can get a chance to investigate that one. Now, the other component of what we heard, our black brother, he said, maybe Michelle Alexander was rushed. Maybe she thought, Obeezy, her mulatto soulmate, Obeezers is going to win. And it'll be post-racial. Nobody will want to hear anything about racism because we got a Negro president. And, I better get this here thing published immediately. And so she put it in, 33% violent offenders, and just slapped it all out. And then they said, wait a minute, this isn't even, we get back to Obama in a minute. You didn't slap all this. They said, wait a minute. And then she go and, man, I could believe that too, even though, I can believe that, the sloppiness of it all and whatever. I could see white people saying we're going to miss out, but I do, and I could just be, maybe I'm being cynical, I do think some of this is willful and intentional on the part of either she and or white people who published this book, Race Soldiers. We're going to put this out to confuse black people. Even what he said, the timing, because this book was published in January of 2010. So if it's, Obama and post-racial and they ain't going to talk, let's get it out quick, and let's get it out in time for Dr. King holiday. Let's get it out in time for Black History Month. Everybody need at least one, everybody need to at least pretend we going to read one book about the niggers for Black History Month. Hey, new Jim Crow. It would make it easy for you. New easy title. You know it's about racism. This is for you, colored boys, colored girls. Get this one, and it's full of slop and lies, and in my opinion, someone who has contempt for black people. It comes out in the way that her children talk about black people. It comes out in the way that black people are quoted in this book. I could be wrong. Much obliged, good. So like that, good thought. I have to ponder on that one about if she was duped, and this is her. My bad. I'm gonna make it up to you all, since I don't believe when you all come to tell the ACLU that the Oakland Riders is planting drugs on us out here in Oakland, and I said, get on out of you lying on people that I'm just die. I will say, if that did happen, she should have put that in the book. 1, 2. I think that kind of disqualifies you from writing this book. You don't know what you're talking about. That's what I've been saying. Didn't I say that? People who think, man, Gus T, you being rude. You done said Michelle Alexander's retarded a bunch of times. Yep. I said you can pick one. Either she is retarded or deliberately racist, and it could be a teaspoon of both. But an incident like that, you sound retarded at minimum. You sound retarded in Oakland, in California. Someone tells you after Mark Furman that they're planting drugs. Don't nobody do that. You sound retarded. Or you're a part of supporting the system of white supremacy racism. Pick one, and you do have that genetic tether to a white woman. Racists. So, hey, let's see. I'll give a few of my notes, and then we'll get to audio segment to other folks if they have commentary and such. Let's see. My notes from this section. She says that portion about them being kicked out, not them, Barbara Hill, William Lee being kicked out. I suspect that these were black people. Pearlie Rucker, I suspect that these are all black people. Very easy to boot black people out for any reason at all, even if they have not committed a crime directly. Super duper easy within the system of white supremacy racism. And I'd say I don't think white people would generally allow white people to be treated like this. If it was a white grandmother and she had an unruly white grandchild who was out behaving like Dill, Reb, I don't think they're going to toss grandma out, white grandma out in the street. I just don't think so. Certainly not make a pattern of that sort of conduct. Let's see. When she gets into the whole, this is in the section boxed in. And she's talking about so-called communities and schools from which they failed to prepare them for the workforce. And once they have been labeled criminals, their job prospects are forever bleak. Her black dad worked for IBM and couldn't get a promotion. He was not a felon. Doesn't sound like he went to a school that did not adequately prepare him to be successful in the workforce. It sounds like he was subject to the system of white supremacy racism. They got evicted. I think she talked about it, that they got evicted. Not because he had to check the box. He was a victim of white supremacy and then had the audacity to marry a white woman. That alone you ought to be castrated and raped for. Castrated and convicted. But you don't have to be a felon to be boxed in. If you are classified as black in a system of white supremacy racism, you've been boxed in. That's why Fuller calls it greater confinement. We already been confined. We are already in prison. In a system of white supremacy, buddy, you are in jail. And white people can show you much quicker than I can tell you. You just don't want to be in greater confinement, which they can do even if you have been convicted. They can show you, hey, this can be solitary. I think they even got they got some of the great movies on prison where they show, hey, even solitary, this can be smaller. Ain't that in life? You could literally be in a box. Get your behavior correct. That's what they say. But you've already been boxed if you're black, and your career opportunities, housing opportunities, all of these things are already. That's why when the young lady wrote in, she said that they look at people on welfare and felons as the same. All of that's Negro. You're one and the same. Even if you're black and you're not on welfare or a felon, it's one and the same. We don't want you. Ugh. We just say we don't want welfare recipients, so we don't have to say no niggers. We don't want to get in trouble, see? Can't say we racist. Let's see. She says, an ex-offender whose driver's license has been suspended or who does not have access to a car often faces nearly insurmountable barriers to finding employment. Again, that's another one where I said, hey, man, you don't have to be an ex-offender. You can be a black person with a spotless record, so-called. And I think that's in the word guide, Mr. Fuller, for that word, spotless, and suggesting white supremacy racism. But if you are a black person, you could say Chicago. And that drive out there, you have tons of black. There is what they call racial disparity in car ownership. Even there is a racial disparity in driver's license ownership. You don't have to be a felon. Matter of fact, just the system of white supremacy for a lot of folks, what they say, round trip, you're going to have to drive 40 miles. And it's 40 miles to the suburbs. That alone, good luck, buddy. We'd already heard Gary Webb driving while black in the book. That ain't got nothing to do with you being a felon. You can have your seatbelt on. Driver's license is clean. Ain't got a fingerprint on it. You got registration, proof of insurance. Hands were at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. Everything. Still in the system of white supremacy racism. And you ain't even supposed to be out here. What are you doing in our racially restricted region talking about you trying to get a job? She says, an unemployed black male from Chicago's South Side explains most of the time the places see, this is what I mean. This is what I mean right here. An unemployed black male from Chicago's South Side explains most of the time the places be too far and you need transportation, and I don't have none right now. If I had some, I'd probably be able to get a job if I had a car and went way into the suburbs, cause there ain't none in the city. It's so jarring because that's not the way the text is written. Like I said, we have read bunches of text where there are white people and hillbilly white people, high school dropout white people, drug addict white people, dumb white people, Fredo, Godfather. They don't speak the Queen's English either. But white people, well, they know how to, you can quote a person, you can quote an ignorant, school dropout, drug addict white person, and you can clean up their speech so that they sound really smart and intelligent when you go to quote them in the book. They don't sound like, oh my God, where did you get this toothless, no-count Appalachian white person? Like, oh, no. In this book, you just have parades of black people who sound like this. I humbly submit that's almost kind of like contrast programming. One, white people, when they read, hear that, oh, that's exactly why we said we don't want these niggers having no job. I don't want no felon talking like that, sounding like that. Right? That's what we said about you niggers. You're ignorant. That's what we said. And in my view, subconsciously or consciously, it could be both. Michelle Alexander, that's what she thinks about black people. That's what most of us think about black people. Indirectly, that's why her children, when they went to see Race with Jesse Owens, black, maybe Jesse Owens wasn't speaking great English in the film either. 1930s, maybe he didn't have the best education because of racists. But maybe they heard a little bit of broken English from old Jesse Owens. Black people. Let's see. She says the black ex-offenders are the most severely disadvantaged applicants in the modern job market. While all job applicants, regardless of race, are harmed by a criminal record, the harm is not equally felt. Even that right there, I just felt, man, you are lying. If I could get one pause for Double O Swango. Remember when we read Blind Eye? One, I can give it. I said yesterday, Gus T has an exemplary memory. For sure. Gary Webb is mentioned in Blind Eye on Michael Swango, racist, race soldier, pretend doctor, killing who knows how many. Gary Webb is referenced in that book. But also, we talked about, during that book, Michael Swango was a convicted felon. He checked the box and went on to get hired and accepted in medical programs and hospitals and all this. And we were stunned. I remember people dialed in and said, what? I got friends and cousins and family members who are convicted felons. And they everything she said in the book. They can't get housing. They can't get a job. They can't get public benefits. How did Mike Swango, how did he get accepted to a medical program? And remember, one of the programs they said, and he checked the box. And you could take it because some of them, they didn't check his background. Some of them, they did check his background and they knew he was a white convicted felon. But they said, man, we got what I had, like I planned it. They said that the white people that were in charge of hiring on these medical staffs and such, they said, because there wasn't no Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, they said, man, we got all these foreigners, all these dark people, spots running around here at the hospital, and they ain't got no criminal record, but they got all that broken English, and you can't even talk to them correct. I don't know what they're talking about. I sure would be nice to have a white man around here and talk to a good old English-speaking white man. What you think, Swango? You want to come join us? I know you got a fella. Psh, don't even worry about that, Swango. Come on. That's what they said. That came to mind like, nah, man, it ain't even close. I mentioned George Steinbrenner last week on the New York Yankees. Convicted felon. It's a whole different world, man. If you classify it as white, it's a whole different world. Brother Elon show you better than I can tell you. The other portion, my memory is exemplary. That doesn't mean I don't make mistakes. I do. We all make errors. But at least up until today, my memory is exemplary. I just told you when I moved to San Francisco, one of the first things I was told, the Oakland Riders. One of the second things I was told was, Brother Gus, you should go to Dog-Eared Books. You should get the book by Clarence Lucene, Pipe Dream Blues. My memory is so amazing. I remember that book, and we interviewed Clarence Lucene as a guest on the Cows in 2010. It's in the archives, and we talked about the segment I'm about to read right now. I remembered it both from when I moved to San Francisco, that's over 20 years ago, and I remembered it from when we talked to the author, that's over 16 years ago. Well, we'll call it 16 even. Pipe Dream Blues, bottom of page 11. Mr. Lucene, who is a black male, writes, the black infant mortality rate is twice that of whites, and at the other end, black life expectancy is falling. Between the cradle and the grave, things do not get much better. Black unemployment continues to be twice that of whites, and a white high school dropout will have a better chance of finding work than a black college graduate. That's what I was reminded of when she talked about if you're black and you have a felon, it's a tough work. No. You can be black and a college graduate, and a white college or a white dropout like Mark Furman has a better chance of getting work than you. A white high school dropout, that was what staggered me. A black college graduate, a white high school dropout like Mark Furman, GED, community college dropout too. That's what I'm talking about. Like, felon ain't got nothing to do with it. You've been boxed just because of the system of white supremacy, racism, and that's what I mean. Like, this book, it does not strike me as getting at that at all. Not even close. Leading you astray, in fact. Us astray. Let's see. When she talks about the section on debtors' prison where every state has its own rules about restitution and court fees and what you have to pay back, that's a discretion. You can make up whatever you want. She did, I think, importantly, note that these fees and all this is a relatively new component of the system of white supremacy within the last 20 years or so. And, oh man, they can pile you up with these fees for life, where you have to pay, like, it could be court costs, it can be money you have to pay back to employ or to the victims, so-called, or whatever, fees for prison, all kind. They even talk about if you have to do time now, you got to pay all those phone bills, and so I mean they just can rack it up on you, and that can be crushing as well, especially if they're garnishing your wages for all of that. Which you talking about even disincentivize you even wanting to acquire a job, for sure. Let's see. When she says that almost all of the countries that place some restrictions on voting in prison are in Eastern Europe, part of the former communist bloc, I'm not sure what that nugget was for. So-called communists. This book isn't about communists. She doesn't explain what a so-called communist is. What are we to even make of that? Should we think we have communist traits here in the U.S.? I don't even know how to process that. I didn't think she could have left that out. Keep it moving. She could have left that out in the original and gave us the section on COINTELPRO in the original publication, which she chickened out about or was too retarded to include. Maybe both. Oh, wait a minute. I thought this was important too. So this one, she is quoting Drake, not Toronto Drake, Clinton Drake, 55-year-old African-American male in Montgomery, Alabama, to the caller's point about the age of a lot of the people that she quotes in the book, where he says that they are older, like 40s, 50s. So maybe that fits into a certain way that she thinks these black people should sound, kind of older, uneducated, urban Nick. Who knows? Anyway. But he's in that age bracket. Shortly before the 2004 presidential election, he said in despair, I put my life on the line for the country. The They say I owe $900 in fines. To me, that's a poll tax you got to pay to vote. It's restitution. They say I came off parole on October 13, 1999, but I'm still not allowed to vote. Last time I voted was in 88. Bush versus Dukakis. Bush won. Incidentally, that is the Willie Horton election, where we got a Negro rapist that swung the tide for that election, they say. I voted for Dukakis. If it was up to me, I'd vote his son out this time too. So he's talking about George W. Bush. I know a lot of friends got the same cases like I got, not able to vote. A lot of guys doing the same things like I was doing, just marijuana. They still do not have recreational cannabis in Alabama. 2026 still do not. I thought this section was important for many reasons. One, this book has kind of a nauseating feel consistently of the problem is voting. The problem is voting. And even in this one, the problem is voting, and or the problem is Republicans. There's a Democratic bias in this book. Carter Stewart, her husband, is a Democrat, was a Democrat elected attorney or appointed attorney. There's a Democratic bias in this book, almost as though kind of a racial narrowing, that the really bad racist white supremacists are the Republicans, which I think is nonsense. Even some of the edits and patches to the book is to try to counter that, I think, where she tries to, well, some of the Democrats are racist too now. You know, Clinton did some bad stuff too. But this is one where, so the system of white supremacy would have been vanquished if Dukakis had won in 88. Are you serious? I do not believe that at all. And that's that same sort of, if we had voted for a different white person, our plight would be better on the plantation. Wrong. Stop disaggregating Republican, Democrat. That's two parts of the white supremacist family. They're in the same house, sometimes in the same bed, and they switch parties sometimes. The other component that I thought was important is later on he says they treat marijuana in Alabama like you've committed treason or something. I was on the 1965 Voting Rights March from Selma. I was 15 years old. At 18, I was in Vietnam fighting for my country, and now unemployed, and they won't allow me to vote. I said with venom. At another point, I said, Michelle Alexander is retarded, or she willfully gave us an inaccurate book. How is Vietnam not analyzed as a component of mass incarceration and the war on drugs? The heroin triangle and smuggling all of that back, the addicted soldiers, like on so many layers. How is Vietnam not included and analyzed as a massive component? And the white supremacy racism of it all, to go and bomb non-white people, Agent Orange sending these, so many layers. Like, are you retarded? Do you need to go back to Stanford for another 10 years, do remedial study? Which is it? But her to lead that out where you got it right in your face. Black Vietnam veteran, substance abuse problems, and I'm now victim of white supremacy. I got all this incarceration and all the rest of it. And you have it's a whole generation of black people just like that. And it gets totally ignored. All of it, the drug abuse, incarceration, all of it. And they're veterans. That gets totally ignored. She doesn't even bring it up as to, wow, is this all connected in some way? And a flagrant aspect of white supremacy racism. Let's see. And then we get back on the voting thing, that all this would be solved if black people voted. That's hogwash. Research indicates that a large number of close elections would have come out differently if felons had been allowed to vote, including at least 7 senatorial races between 1980 and 2000. Again, respectfully, even if George W. Bush had not won in 2000, I do not think Al Gore would have ended the system of white supremacy racism. Didn't he have to go back and make all those patches about Bill Clinton also supporting white supremacy racism and mass incarceration? I thought Al Gore was his tag team partner. Why do I think we would have had a radically different world if it had been Al Gore, not George W. Bush? Come on. Let's see. And she did it again. She says, one ex-offender put it this way: I have no right to vote on the school referendums that will affect my children. I have no right to vote on how my taxes is going to be spent or used. Again, that's something that can be easily cleaned up. Make sure we conjugate the verb accurately. My taxes are, you just put brackets around it, are going to be used. No, this is, and I'm saying it flagrantly, this is how you want to portray black people. Now, she doesn't tell us this is a black person. She just says ex-offender, but she's already said ex-offender, felon equals black. I knew that before I read this book. This is deliberate, and particularly when you have instances where the narrator, they're not even reading what's on the text, so they can still accomplish this goal, making black people sound illiterate, incompetent, imbeciles, can't even speak in an articulate manner. Of course they deserve to be locked up. Of course they deserve to be shunned from employment, housing. They're morons. Crack babies. That's, this is the result of crackheads. I'm supposed to be one too, apparently. Let's see. Oh, man, here we go. She says the pariahs. For Americans who are not caught up in this system of control, it can be difficult to imagine what life would be like if discrimination against you were perfectly legal. Do you mean white people? Oh, she's such a coward. And it caught up in, this is targeted, weaponized deliberately against you. What do you mean caught? Just all of it. This is such a lame book. Easily one of the worst books I've ever read for a billion different reasons. When she gets down to the bottom, she says, quoting presumably other black people, the box has been checked the way he suddenly refuses to look you in the eye. It's not merely the denial of the housing application, but the shame of being a grown man who has to beg his grandmother for a place to sleep at night. That is the system of white supremacy racism. Again, you have a lot of black males who are not felons or convicts who are in the exact same position. That's why we are not men or women, as dictated by the system of white supremacy racism. And a lot of white people don't look black people in the eye anyway. Doesn't have anything to do with them being a felon. You're not on their level. Matter of fact, you could be lynched for that during a certain time period. You call reckless eyeballing. That's what they call it. And they said on the job that a simple question from a coworker who innocently asks, who you going to vote for on Tuesday? I say whether you have a felon or not, the answer is the same. I do not discuss politics on the job. Get me on some conversation on Willie Horton, please. Let's see. She spells criminal black man as one word. Criminal black man. Michelle Alexander is retarded and lame. Anti-black even. You can add that on there too with your white mom. Ugh. Oh, wait a minute. Pause right here, and we'll get to the second section. She says, Willie Johnson, a 43-year-old African-American man in the same age bracket we talked about before, recently released from prison in Ohio. That's when I stopped. We had a listener last week who said, man, she should have talked about how Carter Stewart, how does he practice law in Ohio? Is Carter Stewart for Willie Johnson being locked up? Did you win that case against old Willie Carter Stewart? I thought, oh yeah, if you're going to practice as an attorney in Ohio and they got a gargantuan disparity of black people locked up, black males like Willie Johnson locked up, what was Carter Stewart's role in all of this? Absolutely, she should have talked about that. Especially if Carter Stewart, if you are party to why your children see a movie about Adolf Hitler and Jesse Owens, and their response is, ew, black, ew, what's all this black and black and black and ew. I don't know about that Adolf guy, but black, ew, ew. I'm not black. Ew. You see my grandma? We'll get to the second audio segment. If you have additional thoughts, observations, just write them down. We'll have ample time once we get back to it. Katherine Massey Book Club, Lion Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, audio segment 2.
Not surprisingly, for many black men, the hurt and depression gives way to anger. A black minister in Waterloo, Mississippi, explained his outrage at the fate that has befallen African Americans in the post-civil rights era. "It's a hustle," he said angrily. Felony is the new N-word. They don't have to call you a nigger anymore. They just say you're a felon. In every ghetto, you see alarming numbers of young men with felony convictions. Once you have that felony stamp, your hope for employment, for any kind of integration into society, it begins to fade out. Today's lynching is a felony charge. Today's lynching is incarceration. Today's lynch mobs are professionals. They have a badge. They have a law degree. A felony is a modern way of saying, I'm gonna hang you up and burn you. Once you get that F, you're on fire. Remarkably, it is not uncommon today to hear media pundits, politicians, social critics, and celebrities, most notably Bill Cosby, complain that the biggest problem black men have today is that they have no shame. Many worry that prison time has become a badge of honor in some communities. A rite of passage is the term most often used in the press. Others claim that inner-city residents no longer share the same value system as mainstream society, and therefore are not stigmatized by criminality. Yet as Donald Brayman, author of Doing Time on the Outside, states, one can only assume that most participants in these discussions have had little direct contact with the families and communities they're discussing. Over a 4-year period, Brayman conducted a major ethnographic study of families affected by mass incarceration in Washington, D.C., a city where 3 out of every 4 young black men can expect to spend some time behind bars. He found that, contrary to popular belief, the young men labeled criminals and their families are profoundly hurt and stigmatized by their status. They are not shameless. They feel the stigma that accompanies not only incarceration, but all the other stereotypes that accompany it: fatherlessness, poverty, and often, despite every intent to make it otherwise, diminished love. The results of Brayman's study have been largely corroborated by similar studies elsewhere in the United States. These studies indicate that the biggest problem the black community may face today is not shamelessness, but rather the severe isolation, distrust, and alienation created by mass incarceration. During Jim Crow, blacks were severely stigmatized and segregated on the basis of race, but in their own communities they could find support, solidarity, acceptance, love. Today, when those labeled criminals return to their communities, they are often met with scorn and contempt, not just by employers, welfare workers, and housing officials, but also by their own neighbors, teachers, and even members of their own families. This is so, even when they've been in prison for minor offenses, such as possession and sale of a small amount of drugs. Young black males in their teens are often told, "You'll amount to nothing," or "You'll find yourself back in jail just like your father." A not-so-subtle suggestion that a shameful defect lies deep within them, an inherited trait perhaps, part of their genetic makeup. You are a criminal, nothing but a criminal. You're a no-good criminal. The anger and frustration directed at young black men returning home from prison is understandable, given that they are returning to communities that are hurt by joblessness and crime. These communities desperately need their young men to be holding down jobs and supporting their families, rather than wasting away in prison cells. While there is widespread recognition that the war on drugs is racist, and that politicians have refused to invest in jobs or schools in their communities, parents of offenders and ex-offenders still feel intense shame. Shame that their children have turned to crime despite the lack of obvious alternatives. One mother of an incarcerated teen, Constance, described her angst this way: "Regardless of what you feel like you've done for your kid, it still comes back on you, and you feel like, well, maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I messed up. Maybe if I had did it this way, then it wouldn't have happened that way." After her son's arrest, she could not bring herself to tell friends and relatives, and kept the family suffering private. Constance is not alone. Eerie silence. David Brayman's ethnographic research shows that mass incarceration, far from reducing the stigma associated with criminality, actually creates a deep silence in communities of color, one rooted in shame. Imprisonment is considered so shameful that many people avoid talking about it, even within their own families. Some, like Constance, are silent because they blame themselves for their children's fate and believe that others blame them as well. Others are silent because they believe hiding the truth will protect friends and family members. For example, I don't know what his incarceration would do to his aunt. She just thinks so highly of him. Others claim that a loved one's criminality is a private family matter. Somebody's business is nobody's business. Remarkably, even in communities devastated by mass incarceration, many people struggling to cope with the stigma of imprisonment have no idea that their neighbors are struggling with the same grief, shame, and isolation. Brayman reported that, when I asked participants in the study if they knew of other people in the neighborhood, many did know of one or two out of the dozens of households on the block that had members incarcerated, but didn't feel comfortable talking with others. This type of phenomenon has been described in the psychological literature as pluralistic ignorance, in which people misjudge the norm. One example is found in studies of college freshmen who overestimate the drinking among other freshmen. When it comes to families of prisoners, however, their underestimation of the extent of incarceration in their communities exacerbates their sense of isolation by making the imprisonment of their family members seem more abnormal than it is. Even in church, a place where many people seek solace in times of grief and sorrow, families of prisoners often keep secret the imprisonment of their children or relatives. As one woman responded when asked if she could turn to church members for support, "Church? I wouldn't dare tell anyone at church." Far from being a place of comfort or refuge, churches can be a place where judgment, shame, and contempt are felt most acutely. Services in black churches frequently contain a strong mixture of concern for the less fortunate and a call to personal responsibility. As Kathy Cohen has observed, ministers and members of black congregations have helped to develop what she calls the indigenous constructed image of good black Christian folk. Black churches, in this cultural narrative, are places where the good black people in the community can be found. To the extent that the imprisonment of one's son or relative, or one's own imprisonment, is experienced as a personal failure, a failure of personal responsibility, church can be a source of fresh pain rather than comfort. Those who have had positive experiences of acceptance and sympathy after disclosing the status of a loved one or their own status report they are better able to cope. Notably, however, even after such positive experiences, most family members remain committed to maintaining tight control over who knows and who doesn't know about the status of their loved one. According to Brayman, not one of the family members in his study had come out completely to their extended families at church and at work. Passing, redux. Lying about incarcerated family members is another common coping strategy, a form of passing. Whereas light-skinned blacks during the Jim Crow era sometimes cut off relations with friends and family in an effort to pass as white and enjoy the upward mobility and privilege associated with whiteness, today many family members of prisoners lie and try to hide the status of their relatives in an effort to mitigate the stigma of criminality. This is especially the case at work. Employment settings where family members interact with people they believe couldn't possibly understand what they are going through. One woman, Ruth, whose younger brother is incarcerated, says she would never discuss her brother with her co-workers or supervisor, though they have long shared information about their personal lives. "You know, I talked to my supervisor about stuff, but not this. This was too much, and it definitely made, well, it was just harder to talk to him. He wants to know how my brother is. I just can't tell it to him." When asked to explain why her white co-workers and supervisors would have trouble understanding her brother's incarceration, Ruth explained that it wasn't just incarceration, but everything related to race. As an example, she mentioned nights when she works late. I tell my boss all the time, I say, if you want me to take a taxi, you go down there and flag one for me. I'm not going out there and stand 20 minutes for a cab when they'll run me over to get to you. He's white, and see, he don't know the difference because he's from Seattle, Washington. He looks at me real strange like, what are you talking about? Many ex-offenders and families of prisoners are desperately attempting to be perceived as part of the modern upwardly mobile class, even if their income does not place them in it. Ex-offenders lie by refusing to check the box on employment applications, and family members lie through omission or obfuscation, because they are painfully aware of the historically intransigent stereotypes of criminal, dysfunctional families that pervade not only public discussions of inner cities, but of the black community in general. This awareness can lead beyond shame to a place of self-hate. One mother of an incarcerated teenager described the self-hate she perceives in the black community this way. All your life, you've been taught that you're not a worthy person or something is wrong with you, so you don't have no respect for yourself. See, people of color have, not all of them, but a lot of them, have poor self-esteem because we've been branded. We hate ourselves, you know. We've been programmed that it's something that's wrong with us. We hate ourselves. This self-hate, she explained, does not affect just the young boys who find themselves getting in trouble and fulfilling the negative expectations of those in the community and beyond. Self-hate is also part of the reason people in her neighborhood don't speak to each other about the impact of incarceration on their families and their lives. In her nearly all-black neighborhood, she worries about what the neighbors would think about her if she revealed that her son had been labeled a criminal. It's hard because, like I say, we've been labeled all our lives that we are the bad people. The silence this stigma engenders among family members, neighbors, friends, relatives, co-workers, and strangers is perhaps the most painful, yet least acknowledged, aspect of the new system of control. The historical anthropologist Gerald Sider once wrote, "We can have no significant understanding of any culture unless we also know the silences that were institutionally created and guaranteed along with it." Nowhere is that observation more relevant in American society today than in an analysis of the culture of mass incarceration. Descriptions of the silence that hovers over mass incarceration are rare because people, whether they are social scientists, judges, politicians, or reporters, are usually more interested in speech, acts, and events than in the negative field of silence and estrangement that lurks beneath the surface. But as Brayman rightly notes, those who live in the shadows of this silence are devalued as human beings. There is a repression of self experienced by these families in their silence. The retreat of a mother or wife from friendships in church and at work, the words not spoken between friends, the enduring silence of children who guard what for them is profound and powerful information, are all telling indicators of the social effects of incarceration. As relationships between family and friends become strained or false, not only are people's understandings of one another diminished, but because people are social, they themselves are diminished as well. The harm done by this social silence is more than interpersonal. The silence, driven by stigma and fear of shame, results in a repression of public thought, a collective denial of lived experience. As Brayman puts it, by forcing out of public view the struggles that these families face in the most simple and fundamental acts, living together and caring for one another, this broader social silence makes it seem as though ghetto families simply are that way, broken, valueless, irreparable. It also makes community healing and collective political action next to impossible. Gangsta love. For some, the notion that black communities are severely stigmatized and shamed by criminality is counterintuitive. If incarceration in many urban areas is the statistical norm, why isn't it socially normative as well? It is true that imprisonment has become normal in ghetto communities. In major cities across the United States, the majority of young black men are under the control of the criminal justice system or saddled with criminal records. But just because the prison label has become normal does not mean that it is generally viewed as acceptable. Poor people of color, like other Americans, indeed like nearly everyone around the world, want safe streets, peaceful communities, healthy families, good jobs, and meaningful opportunities to contribute to society. The notion that ghetto families do not, in fact, want those things, and instead are perfectly content to live in crime-ridden communities, feeling no shame or regret about the fate of their young men, is, quite simply, racist. It is impossible to imagine that we would believe such a thing about whites. The predictable response is, what about gangster rap and the culture of violence that has been embraced by so many black youth? Is there not some truth to the notion that black culture has devolved in recent years, as reflected in youth standing on the street corners with pants sagging below their rears, and rappers boasting about beating their hoes and going to jail? Is there not some reason to wonder whether the black community, to some extent, has lost its moral compass? The easy answer is to say yes and wag a finger at those who are behaving badly. That is the road most traveled, and it hasn't made a bit of difference. The media fawn over Bill Cosby and other figures when they give stern lectures to black audiences about black men failing to be good fathers and failing to lead respectable lives. They act as though this is a message black audiences haven't heard many times before, from their ministers, from their family members, and from politicians who talk about the need for more personal responsibility. Many seem genuinely surprised that blacks in the audience applaud these messages. For them, it is apparently news that black people think men should be good fathers and help to support their families. The more difficult answer, the more courageous one, is to say yes. Yes, we should be concerned about the behavior of men trapped in ghetto communities, but the deep failure of morality is our own. Economist Glenn Loury once posed the question, are we willing to cast ourselves as a society that creates crimogenic conditions for some of its members, and then acts out rituals of punishment against them, as if engaged in some awful form of human sacrifice? A similar question can be posed with respect to shaming those trapped in ghettos. Are we willing to demonize a population, declare a war against them, and then stand back and heap shame and contempt upon them for failing to behave like model citizens while under attack? In this regard, it's helpful to step back and put the behavior of young black men who appear to embrace gangster culture in the proper perspective. There is absolutely nothing abnormal or surprising about a severely stigmatized group embracing their stigma. Psychologists have long observed that when people feel hopelessly stigmatized, a powerful coping strategy, often the only apparent route to self-esteem, is embracing one's stigmatized identity. Hence, Black is Beautiful and Gay Pride, slogans and anthems of political movements aimed at ending not only legal discrimination, but the stigma that justified it. Indeed, the act of embracing one's stigma is never merely a psychological maneuver. It is a political act, an act of resistance and defiance, in a society that seeks to demean a group based on an inalterable trait. As a gay activist once put it, only by fully embracing the stigma itself can one neutralize the sting and make it laughable. For those black youth who are constantly followed by the police and shamed by teachers, relatives, and strangers, embracing the stigma of criminality is an act of rebellion, an attempt to carve out a positive identity in a society that offers them little more than scorn, contempt, and constant surveillance. Ronnie, a 16-year-old African-American on probation for a drug-related offense, explains it this way. My grandma keeps asking me about when I'm gonna get arrested again. She thinks just 'cause I went in before, I'll go in again. At my school, my teachers talk about calling the cops again to take me away. The cop keeps checking up on me. He's always at the park making sure I don't get into trouble again. My P.O., probation officer, is always knocking on my door talking shit to me. Even at the BYA, the local youth development organization, the staff treat me like I'm a fuck-up. Shit don't change. It doesn't matter where I go. I'm seen as a criminal. I just say, if you're going to treat me as a criminal, then I'm going to treat you like I am one. You feel me? I'm going to make you shake so that you can say that there's a reason for calling me a criminal. I grew up knowing that I had to show these fools that I wasn't going to take their shit. I started to act like a thug even if I wasn't one. Part of it was me trying to be hard. The other part was them treating me like a criminal. The problem, of course, is that embracing criminality, while a natural response to the stigma, is inherently self-defeating and destructive. While black is beautiful is a powerful antidote to the logic of Jim Crow, and gay pride is a liberating motto for those challenging homophobia, the natural corollary for young men trapped in the ghetto in the era of mass incarceration is something akin to gangsta love. While race and sexual orientation are perfectly appropriate aspects of one's identity to embrace, criminality for its own sake most certainly is not. The war on drugs has greatly exacerbated the problems associated with drug abuse, rather than solve them, but the fact remains that the violence associated with the illegal drug trade is nothing to be celebrated. Black crime cripples the black community and does no favors to the individual offender. So herein lies the paradox and predicament of young black men labeled criminals. A war has been declared on them, and they've been rounded up for engaging in precisely the same crimes that go largely ignored in middle and upper-class white communities: possession and sale of illegal drugs. For those residing in ghetto communities, employment is scarce, often non-existent. Schools located in ghetto communities more closely resemble prisons than places of learning, creativity, or moral development. And because the drug war has been raging for decades now, the parents of children coming of age today were targets of the drug war as well. As a result, many fathers are in prison, and those who are free bear the prison label. They are often unable to provide for or meaningfully contribute to a family. Any wonder, then, that many youth embrace their stigmatized identity as a means of survival in this new caste system? Should we be shocked when they turn to gangs or fellow inmates for support when no viable family support structure exists? After all, in many respects, they are simply doing what black people did during the Jim Crow era. They are turning to each other for support and solace in a society that despises them. Yet when these young people do what all severely stigmatized groups do, try to cope by turning to each other and embracing their stigma in a desperate effort to regain some measure of self-esteem, we as a society heap more shame and contempt upon them. We tell them their friends are no good, that they will amount to nothing, that they are wasting their lives, and that they're nothing but criminals. We condemn their baggy pants, a fashion trend that mimics prison-issue pants, and the music that glorifies a life many feel they cannot avoid. When we are done shaming them, we throw up our hands and then turn our backs as they are carted off to jail.
Whew, this book is so lame and stupid. Man, does anybody feel bad for Bill Cosby? Bill Cosby, she gonna shoot Scott strays at Bill Cosby? Jesus Christ. Easily one of the worst books I have ever read. Katherine Massey Book Club, Context of White Supremacy. Look. Next week, we're starting the chapter, The Minstrel Show. I'm supposed to take this. I said that the whole time, and I keep saying Michelle Alexander is retarded, or this is deliberately poor scholarship, lying to confuse non-white people. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. The number 720-716-7300. The code 564-943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. The number again, 720-716-7300. The code 564-943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. The email untiljustice@gmail.com. I'll finish email number 1, get our callers, get my thoughts in before we wrap up. Let's see, we left off point number 4 in email 1. Many offenders are tracked for prison at early ages, labeled as criminals in their teen years, and then shuttled from their decrepit, underfunded inner-city schools to brand-new high-tech prisons. This statement threw me. I agree in principle, but thought she was referring to overt policy and actions from racists that's published for all to see. Example, X plus Y. It seems Michelle Alexander did receive pushback on this from critiques of the book because it implies intentional design and oversimplifies a complex structural process. Sociologists and legal scholars argue that the evidence shows structural criminalization, not a literal track, because the system doesn't intend to send children to prison. It designs incentives, and disparities produce that outcome. They prefer terms like structural criminalization, racialized discipline, institutional pathways, and cumulative disadvantage, as these avoid implying a single deliberate pipeline operator. Then I thought to myself, if she's upsetting white people, that might be a good thing. But no, Michelle Alexander knows better than to write a statement that can be easily undermined. It's counterproductive, lazy at best. 5. Drake's vote, along with the votes of millions of other people labeled felons, might have made a real difference in 2004. That's the George W. Bush, Al Gore election. There's no doubt their votes would have changed things in 2000. That's oh, I'm sorry, my memory was bad on that one. See, I do make errors. So 2000 was Al Gore, George W. Bush. 2004 was George W. Bush and John Kerry. My apologies. John Kerry was 2004. Al Gore and George W. Bush was 2000. There we go. Following the election, 2000, it was widely reported that had the 600,000 former felons who had completed their sentence in Florida been allowed to vote, Al Gore would have been elected President of the United States rather than George W. Bush. What exactly would black ex-felons gain from voting for Gore when he was part of the government that introduced the laws that Michelle Alexander outlined in this chapter? I said that before, right? He was tag team partners with Bill Clinton. He didn't do nothing to stop the super predator and all of that, so why would we think things would have been dramatically different if old Gore had won things back in 2000? We would have had a different world? No more white supremacy racism? Come on. And I said to see the same thing, that Democratic bias in the text. Let's see. Email number 2, we'll get in a little bit right quick. Let's see. Greetings, Gus, listeners and callers. Last week's book club piqued my interest regarding how location of prisons affects representation in the U.S. Congress, in particular the state of Louisiana, due to the recent Supreme Court ruling which struck down formation of second majority black congressional district in the landmark decision in the Louisiana versus Calais case. The concept is known as prison gerrymandering. 66% of the prison population is black in Louisiana. 2 predominantly white congressional districts benefit from prison gerrymandering. House Congressional District 22 contains a federal prison, and District 18 holds the notorious Angola prison. See, federal judge's ruling clears the way for Louisiana to end prison gerrymandering without waiting until 2030. Oh, man. I know for what James Lowen and what Alexander talked about last week, like, oh, man, like that sort of thing where you have whole districts sometimes where it's like 20 white people control everything because they got Leroy and Jamal locked up and they can't vote, and those prisoners count as a part of the population in that area, so they get all that influence and power and all the rest of it. And yet, like that right there, massive form of white welfare and white mooching, that if we knew, like, what is the budget for that, close down some of those prisons and see how much money we would save. Let's see, boxed in. 1. Landing a job after release from prison is no small feat. You have to check the box. Those who actually land jobs in the suburbs find it difficult to keep them without reliable, affordable transportation. Landing a decent job, paying job, for any victim is no small feat. This is also an issue, of course, for victims who have never been arrested and due to work requirements of public assistance are required to at least be applying for a job. The reason Mr. Fuller advocated to try to keep your living space as close to your job as possible. The black box. Black ex-offenders are the most severely disadvantaged applicants in the modern job market, least likely to receive job offers of any demographic group, and suburban employers are the most unwilling to hire them. I know this is a book focusing on incarceration, but black males in general are the most disadvantaged applicants. Facts. 2. Nearly 1/3 of young black men in the United States today are out of work. The jobless rate for young black male dropouts, including those incarcerated, is a staggering 65%. The U.S. unemployment rate reported monthly by the Bureau of Labor Statistics is a survey and has been criticized for inaccuracies when it comes to black people for underreporting unemployment. The chatbot says the BLS survey may not capture marginalized groups and is susceptible to underreporting, among other issues, when it comes to reporting black unemployment. See why BLS unemployment data gets revised. 3. Effort to address the rampant joblessness among black men labeled criminals. A growing number of advocates in recent years have launched the Ban the Box campaigns. Oscar Grant was murdered January 1, 2009 at the Fruitvale BART station by a BART enforcement official. He was on parole at the time from a gun possession charge. The Ban the Box campaign did not help him. Shout to Oscar Grant. Debtor's prison. Upon release from prison, large debts, payments to probation departments, courts, child support enforcement offices, billed for drug testing, drug treatment. Harsh reality harks back to the days after the Civil War, when former slaves and their descendants were arrested for minor violations, slapped with heavy fines, and then imprisoned until they could pay their debts. Thought we heard about that yesterday. Change without improvement is a hallmark of the global system of racism, white supremacy. Let them eat cake. 1. Welfare reform legislation signed by President Bill Clinton in 1996 ended individual entitlements to welfare and provided states with block grants. The TANF imposes a 5-year lifetime limit on benefits and requires welfare recipients, including those who have young children and lack child care, to work in order to receive benefits. But President Clinton is not racist? The new Medicaid work rules going into effect have been discussed recently on the cows. Yep, just this weekend. Silent minority. 48 states and the District of Columbia prohibit inmates from voting while incarcerated for a felony offense. Only 2 states, Maine and Vermont, permit inmates to vote. Demographics of Maine 2020 census: 93.2% white, 2.5% black. Vermont 2020 census: 94% white, 1.3% black. Seems like this information would be important to include. I agree. 2. Process is so cumbersome, confusing, taken away in a democracy, modern equivalent of poll taxes and literacy tests, colorblind rules designed to make voting a practical impossibility for a group defined largely by race, despicable ways in which the word colorblind was used in this text went totally unrecognized by me in this text the first time I read this book. Worthy of great pity. Well, that is all of us. That is all of us. But again, now, they propaganda this text so much. I don't remember anybody, look at that. All the C.O.W.S people, listeners I'm talking about, who read this book, right? And Michelle, all the interviews that she gave and talks that she was on and Martha's Vineyard and all the rest of it and on NPR, Democracy Now! And everything. I don't remember anybody saying, hey guys, did y'all see, I mean, it's in the title of the book. I don't remember anybody saying whoa, colorblind. Did y'all, why you think Michelle Alexander, I don't remember anybody making a point of that, ever. That's all of us, worthy of great pity. 3, others had been told by parole and probation officers that they could not vote. And although it was not true, they believed it. I bet it was primarily Jamal, Keisha, they were lying to. And I've even seen macro versions of that where they'll put that up on a big billboard, 5-year sentence for voter fraud. But they'll put this up where black people live to try and scare black people from voting. You're going to get in trouble. You go down there to them polls and we going to get you. That type of thing. Even it's what? I haven't even done anything. Man, go vote. 4, research indicates that a large number of close elections would have come out differently if felons had been allowed to vote, including at least 7 senatorial races between 1980 and 2000. I'm not so sure those felon ballots would have made a difference in 2000. The Republican Party had Supreme Court on their side. They would have just thrown those ballots out anyway, but I could be wrong. The pariahs. As Dorsey Nunn, an ex-offender and co-founder of All of Us, or None, once put it, the biggest hurdle you gotta, G-O-T-T-A, get over when you walk out these prison gates is shame. BGQ, I'm not sure that is the biggest hurdle. I agree. It almost seems like the victim is blaming himself primarily, which is not surprising. The biggest problem is white people, their continuing practice of racism, white supremacy. Facts, because I don't remember Mike Swango saying, I got this felony conviction. I feel right shame. I don't remember that at all. 2, black minister in Waterloo, Mississippi. Today's lynching is a felony charge. Today's lynching is incarceration. Today's lynch mobs are professionals. VGQ, something about this does not seem correct to me. Those metaphors, see? 3, it is not uncommon today to hear media pundits, politicians, social critics, and celebrities, most notably Bill Cosby, complain that the biggest problem black men have today is that they have no shame. I don't think there have been any OJ references in the text, which is interesting. I see Obama chastises deadbeat black fathers, the Epic Times. Obama, in blunt terms, tells black men to get over their reluctance to support Kamala Harris. I remember that one. 4, during Jim Crow, blacks were severely stigmatized and segregated on the basis of race, but in their own communities they could find support, solidarity, acceptance, love. Could vomit. Today, when those labeled criminals return to their communities, they are often met with scorn and contempt, even members of their own family. With all the acceptance and love, 6 million black people still fled the so-called Jim Crow South during the Great Migration. Warmth of other sons. I was thinking, Neely Fuller Jr., I remember one of the things he said, what's Saturday night and Negro culture? I'm gonna cut me somebody tonight. Get my razor and Jimmy gonna be running off at the mouth at the club. Remember Bill Russell? He said he would go to the club in second wind. He said they would go to the juke joint in Louisiana. And he said, nigga, you tapping your foot to my song? That's my chord in the jukebox. You don't tap your foot to my song. And then it's on and I back you upside the head and all that. Like, what? Come on, man. Ain't it all that black love? Are we black? Proud? Come on, man. Last one, then we'll see if our callers have commentary. While there was widespread recognition that the war on drugs is racist and that politicians have refused to invest in jobs or schools in their communities, and who is responsible for this so-called war? People classified as white, not Leroy, Jamal, Keisha, NAACP, Congressional Black Caucus, Bill Cosby. Come on. We'll be return eerie silence. Let's see. Folks have commentary, *61. We'll see our caller 5962, star 61 if other folks have commentary. Did you have additional round of comments to share? 5962 should be with us.
Yes, I also wrote down the same thing as the emailer said about the black minister from Waterloo, Mississippi. Felony is the new N-word. I don't think that's accurate. I think it's just more of you're a Negro who happens to be a felon as well. And then again, with her equating either voting or politics that's going to solve this problem, where she says that while there's a widespread recognition that the war on drugs is racist and that politicians have refused to invest in jobs or schools in their communities, parents of people in prison still feel intense shame. Again, I think that's inaccurate. Politicians aren't the ones who are creating this issue. White people are the ones who are creating this issue. And then the false equation where she says that lying about incarcerated family members is just like someone in the Jim Crow times that are light-skinned that can pass, trying to pass for safety. I don't think those two things are connected at all. And then, when I said earlier that her age group of people seem to be in their 40s and older, and maybe that's the reason why she vocalizes their passages in that manner, that was erased with the younger person that she was talking about that was 16 years old, because she does the same thing. And I think that's interesting that we're coming up on the part of the book that's called The Minstrel Show, because if I'm not mistaken, that's part of the minstrel show is changing your voice to sound like you're an ignorant black person. And that's all I have.
Oh, yes, it absolutely is. The Negro dialect. We love that. You got talking white, talking black, all of that. Yes, Negro dialect. Got to sound like old Prima. Oh, my God. I cannot wait for it. Right quick, I guess, the tidbit on passing where she gives us this, I guess, comparison analogy that black people, non-white people who are able to pass for non-white people, often with one white parent, genetic tether to someone classified as white, they're able to be accepted as white, and comparing that to people who, I guess, have a relative or what have you in greater confinement, and so they lie, omit that information to avoid trouble with all of that. You said you do not think that is an accurate comparison. Why do you think because that's like a chapter or at least a subsection title. Why do you think she tried to force that analogy on us, that this is akin to passing in the 20th century for non-white people, black people, which I almost like her, since she does have a white parent. I'm not saying she's passing, but I'm just saying that often is a part of how you get into this whole process. Why do you think she tried to force that analogy on us?
I'm not sure. I think that the reason she might have tried to force that analogy is because she does have a white parent, and maybe she sees some of that safety within her parent structure at the home, and that's why she can equate those to the same thing. But like I said, I just think that lying about having an incarcerated family member isn't going to grant you any more protection than not having an incarcerated family member if you are classified as black in the system of racism, white supremacy, in my opinion.
That sounds logical to me. My understanding of passing to be accepted as white, like there's a massive gain for all of this lie. I do not see any of that for omitting or not telling people, freely divulging that you have a relative who's in greater confinement or someone that you care about, whatever it is, in greater confinement. I don't see any, wow, you get accepted, you get benefits, there's any advantage to that at all. It's just, I'm going to leave this information out because I don't think it will benefit me if you know about this. And especially if we're talking about a racist that I work with, they already treat me like a nigger. It'll just be worse. It's not comparable at all. Like I remember seeing that when we were when I knew we were going to read that part for this weekend, I almost put the music for biracial back in because I was just like, do you see the red bone deception? I said, I don't even think she would, that whole section might not have been in the book. Retract. That section would not have been in the book if she didn't have a white parent. That's what I'm saying. Like, what is going on? And it's not, the editors, folks are supposed to read this before it's published. They should have interrogated him like, wait a minute. I know your white mom and all that. I got. But this doesn't even make sense. I keep saying, is Michelle Alexander retarded? Like, for reals, you have people that are developmentally delayed. I'm a little retarded. Just let me know if Michelle Alexander is retarded. I will calm down with a lot of my commentary and just say, oh, my bad. She did the best she can. And, hey, we give a great effort. And, hey, I support folks who have developmental delays or challenges. And this is a great effort. I don't hear people say, man, Michelle Alexander's retarded, but she did a great job in putting that book together. They don't say that. They talk like she is a brilliant Stanford alumnus scholar. Man, let's see. The bill. Does anybody feel bad for Bill Cosby? This hit way different now. Like, this is before the prison thing and all that. And everything. Like, what? And again, you can beat up on the Congressional Black Caucus, NAACP, Bill Cosby. You can't say white. We got to get our. You can't say no white people now. Let's see. All this nonsense about the rite of passage and going to prison, like, all of that is tired and lame. The problem is white people. Period. Not Kanye West, Jay-Z, Nicki Minaj. Like, get out of here. They were locking up black people before such a thing as hip-hop even existed. They didn't even have, they got, even the so-called civil rights movement, they got tons of pictures of black people with suspenders on and suits being smacked around and jailed. So what was the problem, man? Kanye West wasn't even born then. Rick Ross neither, since we mentioned Florida. Let's see. She said the church, Negro church, is far from a place of comfort or refuge. Churches can be places where judgment, shame, and contempt are felt most acutely. I would say that's kind of black culture. I mean, the dozens. We brag about it, name calling and showing contempt, public contempt for other black people. That is black culture. The black church in this cultural narrative are places where the good black people in the community can be found. When I think of all of that, I just think of the religion of white supremacy. The so-called black church is a product of the religion of white supremacy. There's no such thing as good black people. She says, according to Bremen, not one of the family members in his study had come out completely to their extended families at church and at work, using the language that is associated with someone being a part of anti-sexual behavior, using that to suggest that someone has not informed you. Oh, I have people in greater confinement. I found that so massively incorrect. The same thing with the passing. It does not make sense. These are not the same behavior. That I am in, what I do with my genitals is not the same as Leroy may have been unjustly incarcerated. That is not the same at all. Even though you might be sodomized while you are unjustly incarcerated, that is not the same at all. Let's see. And I don't even know that I've heard anyone talk that way. If you want to talk about black people, is that a part of Negro slang? Do they say that? Oh, I ain't came out here telling you that Leroy got another, bid 10 to 15. I ain't came out. I've never heard that. Maybe that's what they talk in Oregon, maybe. The passing chapter, like I said, as soon as I saw it, what in the hell? Not telling someone that you have a cousin or brother or parent or child in greater confinement? That is akin to, I have a white parent and am pale like Michelle Alexander so I can be accepted as white. That's not the same at all. That's not the same at all. You have to practice racism to so-called pass. We've talked about that. They got tons of movies, books, all of that. I don't think you practice racism when you don't divulge Leroy. Oh, they locked him up again. I don't think you're going to be required to practice racism to keep that information to yourself. It doesn't make, like I said, even the only reason this would pop into her brain computer is because, oh, she got that white mama. That is, I'm telling you, if she has two black parents, we may have never heard of this sloppy book. And if we did, this chapter would not be in the book. It would have never popped in her brain computer to try and force this goofy comparison because it doesn't make sense, and that would have been glaringly recognizable to her if she didn't have that white mom. Let's see. The portion where she says, as an example, she mentioned nights when Ruth mentioned nights when she works late. I tell my boss all the time, I say, if you want me to take a taxi, you go down there and flag one for me. I'm not going out there and stand 20 minutes for a cab when they'll run me over to get to you. He's white and see, he don't know the difference. Don't know the difference because he's from Seattle, Washington. He looks at me real strange like, what are you talking about? Pause right there. She just told us last week about the study in Seattle where the police exclusively target the Negroes for crack. So what do you mean he's from? This makes it sound like they don't practice racism in Seattle. For Gus T and those in 206, man, I will smack you upside the head for even suggesting that. Your book refutes that. What do you mean? What do you mean? Seattle's police department was under consent decree at the time that this goofy book was published. Let's see. Bill Cosby and the gangster. And then that's what I mean. Like, there seems like it does not surprise me at all. The person who wrote this book and wrote this section, Gangsta Love, and the passing portion, is married to a black male who's a prosecutor who does not agree with this goofy book, who probably locks up a lot of black people in Ohio, and that they have children who all have one white grandparent, and they have children who, ew, I'm not black. I don't talk about nothing black. I'm not no black people in black. Ew. All of that makes sense. I see the very uniform pattern, the anti-blackness in it all. Exactly what I said in this book. It all makes sense. And it's Gangsta Love, Gangsta. Kind of the minstrel performance right there even. And we got Bill Cosby too, comedian, so minstrel through and through. She says that gangster rap and the culture of violence that has been embraced by so many black youth, the culture of violence on this planet is the system of white supremacy. Did I keep yelling about Vietnam? That's the culture of white supremacy right there. Right there. Make movies about it, ship your children off to go pick up a rifle, learn you about fighting, firearms, all of it. That's the culture of violence right there. And she got generations. My son went to Iraq. My other son went to Afghanistan. That's the culture of white supremacy right there. Fuller, I was in the Korean War. Oh, I was in the Vietnam War. That is the culture of violence right there. What are you talking about, Kanye West? NWA, get out of here. Bill Cosby. Let's see. She said, is there not some truth to the notion that black culture has devolved in recent years, as reflected in you standing on street corners with pants sagging below their rears and rappers boasting about beating their hoes and going to jail? Is there not some reason to wonder whether the black community to some extent has lost its moral compass? What? I'm even going to have to do the rewind. Do you all remember that song from way back, Negro culture? Shake Your Money Maker. That sounds like we had a strong moral compass way back then. Hey, I told you, Neely Fuller Jr., what is that? I got my razor, I'm going to cut somebody tonight. Does that sound like we had a strong moral compass, whatever it is? We read Maya Angelou's book. She was talking about drinking the Mad Dog. What are you talking? Ain't no such thing as morality in a system of white supremacy racism, period. And even a lot of the jazz artists, they were talking about the same thing. I done got drunk, my lady done left me. They were talking about a lot of them, the same thing, just without the firearms. Go back and listen. Let's see. The wheeze pop out in this one too. She says, economist Glenn Lowry once posed the question, are we willing to cast ourselves as a society that creates criminogenic conditions for some of its members and then acts out rituals of punishments against them as if engaged in some awful form of human sacrifice? That's the system of white supremacy racism, the religion of white supremacy racism. That's the Klan, ritualistic sacrifice of black people. Jeff Dahmer, all of that's white culture. And that we, so we're talking about that through there, we. She has more of that conflation of black and gay pride as well throughout, which I find repulsive as well. It's not even equivalent. Let's see, I'll finish up my email and then we can wrap for today. Let's see, the email where I left off at, email number 2, eerie silence. This type of phenomenon described in psychological literature as pluralistic ignorance. As Katie Cohen has observed, ministers and members of black congregations have helped to develop what she calls the indigenous constructed image of good black Christian folk. Pluralistic ignorance may also be analogous to victims blaming themselves primarily for their circumstances due the masterful job racist white supremacists have done on our psyche. I looked up the citation referenced in this section, and it references a book titled The Boundaries of Blackness, AIDS, and the Breakdown of Black Politics by Kathy Cohen. I have not read the text, but responses to AIDS and the formerly incarcerated do not seem to be equivalent. I am suspicious of this assertion about black churches and their response to the incarcerated, but maybe I am wrong. Passing redux, the stigma of criminality. This is especially the case at work, employment settings where family members interact. Lying about incarcerated family members is another common coping strategy, a form of passing, whereas light-skinned blacks like her during the Jim Crow era sometimes cut off relations with friends and family in an effort to pass as white. This is just foul, equating passing with lying on black family members who were incarcerated. I would not even categorize the example of Ruth as lying. She was just being logical. Limit how much you tell race soldiers about your personal life, including non-white victims at your place of employment. Should be a part of all victims' code. Suspected racists will just use it against you, even some non-white people, unfortunately, with all the talk regarding passing by black people, books, movies, plays, articles, etc. I tried to get some data on its incidence in the U.S. The chatbot said, tens of thousands in the 19th and early 20th century, a research article titled The Fluidity of Race Passing in the United States 1880 to 1940, Emily Nix Nancy Keehan, National Bureau of Economic Research, 2015, quoted a statistic of 19% of black males have passed at some point in their lives. 19% seems high to me. However, I have not done a thorough reading of the paper. See the C.O.W.S broadcast, Workplace Racism, every Thursday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern Time Zone, where limiting discussion of your personal life on the job is discussed on a weekly basis. Also, see Black Men in the U.S. Who Passed as White Lived Longer in the 20th Century. Wacky. Brahman puts it, by forcing out public view the struggles that these families face in the most simple and fundamental acts, living together and caring for one another. This broader social silence makes it seem as though ghetto families simply are that way, broken, valueless, irreparable. Healing, ? Political action, ? So the reason racists don't do anything about the problem is because victims don't talk about it? I'm confused. Agree. Racists, they could set up forums and have us talk about it with snacks and everything, right? Gangsta love. 1. What about gangsta rap and the culture of violence that has been embraced by so many black youth? The most violent culture in the known universe is white culture, and it's not even close. Reb Bill. 2. Media fawn over Bill Cosby and other figures when they give stern lectures to black audiences about black men failing to be good fathers and failing to lead respectable lives. Need for more personal responsibility. We discussed the data proving that black fathers are more involved with their children than any other demographic in the C.O.W.S book club selection, The Man Not, by Dr. Tommy J. Curry. President Obama did the same thing, sadly. The deep failure of morality is our own. Economist Glenn Lowry once posed a question: are we willing to cast ourselves as a society that creates criminogenic conditions for some? Dr. Lowry is an interesting victim, non-white. He is an economist who characterized himself as a black conservative during the 1980s, during the Reagan era. He became the first tenured black professor of economics at Harvard University at age 33. He acknowledged becoming a father out of wedlock, was at one time a crack addict, aren't we all, apparently as a professor when he was in Boston, and was charged with assault and battery of a female. He later became a born-again Christian and progressive. Wow, religion of white supremacy. We condemn their baggy pants, a fashion trend that mimics prison-issue pants, and the music that glorifies a life many feel they cannot avoid. When we are done shaming them, we throw up our hands and then turn our backs as they are carted off to jail. So, if they did not wear baggy pants and listen to Mozart, racists would stop practicing racism against them? Psh! White male high school dropouts have better job prospects than black males with a college degree. Echo, echo, echo. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, come on. That statistic about the dropout rates and such, that book is way old. It was published way before this book was published. To me, it's embarrassing to even have to go through that whole red herring of, oh, well, maybe it's hip hop, and that even deserves that. She includes time to discuss that, but not COINTELPRO. She's retarded, or this is willful deception. You take a pick. Next week, we start off with The Minstrel Show. I cannot wait. We'll be here tomorrow for the Counter-Racist Weekly Review, same time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We'll catch up on what has gone down the last 7 days, probably more about prisons as well. More to come from this text, all the rest of it, hopefully constructive as we hopefully get done with this here tripe ASAP. Sobriety would be best, given what we've read here. Hey, given all the lies and misinformation, we need high-functioning brain computers. So, yes, put the crack down. high-functioning brain computers will lead us to replacing white supremacy with justice. Creator, we ask that you remind us, stop saying not all white people are racist. Even Bill Clinton. Remind us, stop name-calling people classified as black. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cow signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. Problem. You're a victim. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.